He realized it was sudden, but he had memories of his past life. He was the third prince, and his name was Hiro Cardarasa. He remembered that in his past life, he had been an office worker in Japan. Crowded to the point of terror, boring work, unfair human relationships. He had been freed from that life and reborn as a prince from a country in another world. At first, he was even happy for a second that he had become a prince. But this country was below the poverty line. The boy practiced with the agile old man. Hiro, despite his young age, surpassed him, showing incredible skill and confidence. Thus, he defeated his. The sword instructor, the head of the Clifford clan, was amazed. In just 2 years, he was able to defeat him in 1 round. Hiro realized that the instructor was no longer young. However, the old man was confident that it was to his credit. At this rate, he wouldn't be afraid of any opponent. Hiro doubted that anyone would want to attack this country. Even if they were to be conquered, there would be nothing to take away. Other countries wouldn't pay attention to them because they would be ballast to them. Their country was very desperate. The kingdom of Cardarasa, the country where he was born, a small state with a population of only 1,000 people. Also, Hiro was the third prince of this country. His brothers were certainly powerful, but also dangerous. Perhaps the throne could have passed to him. Normally one would be happy about that, but as it was happening in this country, Hiro wasn't happy at all. The soil wasn't fertile, so they couldn't grow anything, and they didn't have any resources either. Not only was this country small, but it was also terribly poor. Hiro realized the hopelessness of this place. He told Hisu that he would go. Each time, the old man was surprised that the prince would deliberately go to such a thing. Hiro understood the situation of their kingdom. He wanted to increase the area of the crop fields as soon as possible. The prince walked through the streets of the poor town and came to the field. He was greeted by joyful residents who had much to boast about. They had been working the land since morning. At first, there were no problems, but then there was a problem with one tree. Upon hearing about the problem tree, Hiro was surprised. It really stood out from the others in terms of size. Even the 10 of them couldn't deal with it. Hiro assumed that it had been guarding this land for several hundred years. It was a shame to cut it down. However, he realized it was necessary for the crops. Magical ability existed in this world. It was a power that only manifested in members of select clans. If you had them, you could improve your physical abilities. Hiro swung his sword and swung it at the trunk of a mighty tree. The base collapsed, leaving only a stump in the tree's place. This gave the villagers the strength to continue working in the field. The prince was offered steamed potatoes for his work. The workers felt that by summer, they would cultivate the field here. If they planted potatoes, they could harvest them by winter. Hiro liked his people. Last winter they starved to death. He wouldn't let that happen this time. They still needed the fields. Anyway, now they were developing the land. They grew these potatoes from seed potatoes imported from another country. Thanks to the fact that there were potatoes growing even in such a weak land, this country was basically saved. However, what did it cost them? The sleepy prince struggled to move around the corridors of the castle. Sword training in the morning. In the afternoon, training to rule the country. In between, land development. That seemed too much for him. A young girl, radiant with joy, ran out to meet Hiro. It had been a long time since she and her sister had seen each other. She was relieved to see him. The girl had come to pick up a forgotten item. He was on an expedition, so she had escaped here. Mayali was the first princess of the kingdom of Cardarasa. She sacrificed herself. At one reception, A prince of a rich country took notice of her and married her on the condition that he would help their country. Thanks to that, they hadn't had as many famine victims last year. Hiro remembered the severity of those times. That girl had been his first love, but he couldn't help anyone, so he let her go. Her husband was a horny man, and the rumors about him were unflattering. She looked thinner even then when they had nothing to eat in the country. Hiro could also see the bruises on her wrist peeking out from her sleeve. He felt sorry for his sister. The prince had offered to take her out to dinner together. They, as always, could not be pleased with the food. But even from that, it turned out to be quite tolerable. Mayali had heard that her brother had been active lately. Thanks to him, they were finishing developing even the lands they were supposed to do only next year. Hiro was doing his best because there was no room to plant the potatoes she had sent. It was all about making sure her efforts didn't go to waste. His sister cradled him in her arms and thanked him, saying that he had always been such a good kid. To her, he had always remained so. She asked him not to do anything stupid. Hiro realized that he wasn't omnipotent. He could help develop lands because he had magical abilities. He was strong because he was trained by a sword-wielding instructor. When looked at relative to the whole country, his strength alone was still like powerlessness. In order to save the country, as an ordinary office clerk, he had no knowledge at all. He didn't know how to put the knowledge into action, and to infinity many times he had things go wrong. And still Hiro wanted to do something. He just recklessly did what he could every day. Mayali noticed that he had fallen back into heavy thinking. She calmed him down, telling him that she would think of something. Hiro questioned whether she would return if he made their country rich. The girl realized that it was impossible. After the meal, Mayali was about to leave. She was very fond of her adorable Hiro. He looked down at her from the top of his head. She smiled sweetly and waved at him. The prince realized that she had paid a visit in order to pass on help from that man. Those things his sister had traded her life for. At that second, he firmly resolved to become strong. At this rate, he wouldn't get anything by effort alone. Not with his sword, not with his studies. Unless something special happens, it's the end. Hiro decided to change the current situation. Wasn't there a power suitable for his situation? Suddenly, a voice that arose in his head was about to give an answer. The boy was startled and bounced off the windowsill. He felt a pain in his heart. Looking around, he asked who was here. The voice introduced itself as the respondent. It had always existed in him and watched over him. Now that Hiro was begging so hard, he would surely become his power. There were people in this world who were born with magical abilities. If you have an ability, with a small probability, you can also possess a special power called magic. It was a blob of magical power, providing answers to any questions the host had. The responder was Hiro's magic. He positioned himself on the bed to study it. It could be used to get information about the thing the magician was seeing. The amount of information depended on the magical power. It was used once every 30 days. The latter could cause inconvenience. Hiro decided to use all his magic power to learn more for this world. He wanted to know how to make fertilizer, as effective as possible, one that Hiro could make himself. The respondent had named everything he needed. The guy didn't know just where to buy it. The maximum consumption of magical power was confirmed. As an exception, the respondent decided to talk about rank A information. Normally, it took time to create fertilizer, in case he needed it in a short period of time. The respondent recommended studying alchemy. This sounded like something crazy. If one used alchemy, the working time would be cut in half. Hiro realized that one couldn't just use magic. forbidden several hundred years ago by the church. But the respondent knew the method of preparation, and with the help of alchemy, it was possible to realize it all. If the prince does this, he will save this country, this world. And it was all because the church forbade it. He wasn't afraid of prohibition. To study alchemy, he should have traveled about 24 kilometers to the southeast. The coordinates were sent to his brain. There was the legacy of the legendary alchemist, Chronal Kaiser. The respondent advised that he should take it for himself. But that legacy was in a hard-to-reach place. Hiro had to travel a long way to get there. He climbed steep mountain slopes that were unstable. Finally, he reached his goal. It was the place pointed out by the respondent, where it was cold due to lack of fresh air. To magically increase his physical strength, he didn't know how much more he had left, so he saved it. Hiro walked down a dark corridor that was illuminated by the light of his flashlight. It led him to a hall that had a puzzle in the center of it. The object he found was definitely not of natural origin. Perhaps there was something inside. The prince guessed that behind the puzzle was the legacy of Chronal Kaiser. Solving the puzzle was not difficult. He felt warmth and realized there was a room ahead. Suddenly his face lit up with light. The figure in the center of the lab announced that someone had finally been found who would inherit his alchemy. 160 years and 32 days he had waited for this. Hiro didn't realize if it was the legendary alchemist Chronal Kaiser. The figure replied that he was just a golem with a recorded memory. He was waiting here for his successor. Hiro realized that for the church, alchemy was a desecration. However, the golem had no time. Its existence was temporary. There were 5 days left before the magical powers that kept it here would run out. If that was the case, then every second mattered and Hiro should not hesitate. He resolutely asked to be trained. The golem was glad his pondering didn't take long. He would imbue him with the knowledge of alchemy in 5 days. Hiro couldn't tell if he was smiling. The prince had little food and water left, and it seemed he would be able to train for those 5 days without rest or sleep, regenerating himself with magic. The main problem was that he wouldn't be in the castle for all those days. Hiro would get angry. Golem explained that everything they learned in 5 days would be the basics. After that, the boy would need to be trained in the materials. Hiro realized that by learning the basics and concepts, he would be able to practice effectively on his own. The teacher asked his name. Hiro introduced himself to him. His lineage was known to the teacher. However, the man decided that it was none of the lad's business. He motioned for the lesson to begin. Golem hadn't heard himself called teacher in a long time. 5 days passed. The teacher asked the question if the foundation of alchemy was perfect. Hiro gave an affirmative answer. Alchemy was activated by infusing magical power in different ways into a special blue gemstone. Unlike other magic, alchemy is similar to programming in regularity. The infusion of magical power in different ways to the code, the blue gem to the compiler. To form magic or code required the general concept of functions, pointer, array, and parameter. After calculating the information about the location of the seals, the connections between the magical forces need to be mixed thoroughly. And as a result of this mixing and smelting, one could produce matter or body, soul. That was rational magic. And if it was summarized, it went like this. He asked his teacher's opinion. He thought about it. He was glad Hiro could do it. If someone else had been here, it was unlikely he would have been able to teach him the basics. The prince replied that he just knew something similar to alchemy. He knew programming, which helped. If he didn't know it, he wouldn't have a few days to understand the basics. The teacher replied that there were no other subjects that were similar to alchemy. Among all magic, Alchemy was the most rational. It is a beautiful magic, but he was calm and could finally leave. He accepted him as his successor and entrusted him with his accumulated wisdom. The master thanked Hiro. He prayed for more of that knowledge in his hands. His last words were his request to pass it on to the next generation. Being grateful to his teacher, the prince promised to do so. He learned the basics, mastered the concept and idea. Later, he would study the leftover materials of the legendary alchemist Chrono Kaiser. Hiro gained the power. The alchemy that had been banned was gone from this world. With this power, it was possible to change everything. And he will. It's been 2 years since Hiro started studying alchemy. Simply put, alchemy is a processing technique. Since everything requires material, you can change the substance a little, but you can't turn stone into gold. But if you use this handy magic, then, depending on the plan, you can make a lot of money and become rich. If one thinks only of himself, Hiro would be more correct to abandon this kingdom. He would find a place for himself anywhere. But he won't do that since he loved his kingdom. Even if he only had that power, he would save the kingdom. He'll get his sister back. For that, Hiro has studied a lot of things and will finally start moving. He would definitely do it, even if he had to do it alone. At least, that's what he thought. One day, he met a girl he knew who called him a crybaby. Hiro recognized her as Hibana, and he was right. Hisa's granddaughter, Hibana Clerford, was going to the Principality of Kiner to be trained in swordsmanship. She was his childhood friend. Hibana was being trained by an acquaintance of Hisa's. But since her training had already ended, she had returned home. The guys hadn't seen each other for a long time. The guy asked not to call him a crybaby since he had changed. His said that his granddaughter had turned 14 and had enough skills to join the Bronze Knight Order of the Principality of Kiner. It was the strongest knight order that only a high-ranked swordsman could join. To Hibana, he was the lowest order of all. And yet, it was still very impressive to Hiro. He inquired as to the reason for her return. If she was able to join the Bronze Knight Order at such an age, she would certainly be able to join the Gold Knight Order. Isn't that an honor for a swordsman? The girl was angry. She came back because of their promise. If he said he forgot about it, she would hit him. They sat in the middle of a field of flowers. Hibana tried to comfort him. After all, Meili was getting married today. They could be sent home. The boy noticed that she was crying too. She loved Meili too, and didn't want to see her so sad. Hiro declared that he would change this kingdom. He couldn't right now, but he would definitely change it. If that was what he said, then Hibana would become his sword. Then they made a promise to each other. Of course, she remembered it. I mean, she wished she could say that. In fact, she couldn't understand herself when she returned to this kingdom. As she grew older, Hibana kept thinking that this country couldn't be changed anymore. As she walked outside, she noticed what a dangerous, questionable kingdom Cardarasa was. Imagining that Hiro had given up on his dream made her very afraid. And she thought it would be a good idea to join the Golden Knight Order. Hiro asked why on earth she was here. In the letter, her grandfather asked if she had given up on Hiro. He might actually be able to save the kingdom. Also, Hiro didn't give up. He was trying to do something. That was why she had come back, to see if he had really given up on his dream. A kind smile played on the old man's face. Heath knew that he would soon spring into action, which was why he had written to his granddaughter. He had actually foreseen very accurately. Ever since he was an infant, His had always looked out for him. The prince could never hide any secret from him. As the old man began to remember how the little boy had cried, Hiro asked him to stop. He and his granddaughter laughed merrily. The prince felt like he had support. He realized that now was as good a time as any. Hibana asked him to clarify something. How Hiro was going to save this good-for-nothing kingdom. She wondered if he actually had the power to accomplish what he had planned. She loved this country too, so she wanted to save what she could and fulfill their promise. But if it was an impossible dream, a promise, then all they had to do was leave her behind. Hiro decided to show them something interesting. This place was in the basement and inaccessible to other people. He led them to his lab. None of them knew about the existence of a basement in the castle before, because Hiro had created it himself. It was impossible to believe it. It was true of this room and this passage as well. It would take decades to build a stone wall and conduct light alone. With the skills of their kingdom's carpenters, it was impossible. Hiro explained that it could be done with magic, but not human strength. His thought the prince was up to something, but he never thought he would prepare something like this. What the boy wanted to show them was in front of him. It was the result of his desperate study and research over the past 2 years. His invention was going to change the small kingdom of Cardarasa greatly. The experiment had succeeded in producing ears of wheat under laboratory conditions. Their ancestors had tried so many times to grow it, but none had succeeded. In his testing ground, he created and experimented on things that would help their country. One of the things was wheat. Hiro strengthened its survivability with breeding. It could grow even in cold climates and get sick less, and its growth rate was very fast. Wheat could be planted in the spring and also in early summer. The speed was exceptional, and it would come out tasting good. It had a lot of sugar in it, so if you baked bread, it would be sweet and puffy. Hibana wondered if it would grow like it did here if planted on the ground. It turned out it wouldn't. No matter how amazing the wheat was, if there wasn't nutritious soil, it wouldn't germinate. His soil used a very good fertilizer. In the midst of all these ears lay the corpse of a monster. The bodies of the creatures that ravaged their country contained miasmas that made food unusable and polluted the environment. So Hiro came up with this seed. It was to be planted in a corpse. This ensured that the plant would grow. Then the buds would begin to sprout, neutralizing the miasmas while absorbing nutrients. After that, the corpse begins to dry out and return to the soil. This soil becomes very nutritious as there is a lot of energy in the monster's body. Hibana was delighted with his invention. She couldn't even believe that we could grow in this land. Hiro replied that the land of this kingdom could do many things, maybe even become an exporter of food to big countries. He thought that was interesting. This was just the beginning. Hiro with this power could change everything. When he made the promise, he was just a helpless child, but now it was different. He had the power to make his dream come true. The boys decided to keep their promise. Hibana believed that with his power this kingdom would change, and she wanted to see it from a special place. She promised once again to become his sword. Suddenly, he's remembered that Hiro had said he had grown the wheat himself and built this cellar. The prince had calmly confirmed it. The old man guessed that he had used something that the church had banned several hundred years ago. Hiro realized that there was nothing to hide from him. He recognized that it was alchemy. Everyone realized that the church would not sit idly by. The prince asked him to calm down. He had already made up his mind. He knew it was a forbidden power, but if he had a chance to save the kingdom, he would take it. He wasn't afraid of the influence of the church. Hiro was ready to protect his favorite cause. His eyes were full of determination. His decided that he would help him. Inspired by the idea, he was going to support the prince. Hibana pulled her friend to her side. Because of his use of alchemy, she wouldn't change her opinion of him. And if anyone did anything bad to him because of it, she would get revenge on them. Hiro was counting on them. Since the girl wanted to be his knight, she offered to initiate her now. Hiss informed him that a formal initiation ceremony would have to be held for that to happen. Besides, she couldn't be the personal knight of someone from the royal family. Hibana remembered a silly rule. According to it, the royal family itself must initiate the knight, hold the ceremony, and give the knight a made sword. Knight initiation was a very important tradition, and nothing should be skipped in this matter. Hibana had become Hiro's secret accomplice, and he wanted her to be able to act freely. A ceremony had to be held so that all people would know that she was his knight. Hibana asked him to hurry up with it. In her opinion, a cheap sword was enough. However, it wasn't that simple, because she would use it to protect the prince. She didn't think that by alchemy, he would make her a cool sword. Turns out, Hiro had planned it. He would make a sword that could surpass even the sacred sword of the Principality of Kinner. The girl noticed that in the Principality of Kinner, only 12 knights from the Golden Order are allowed to have sacred swords. But if they couldn't do so, they wouldn't enrich their kingdom. Hiro has borrowed a sword from Hibana. He will use it as a base and make a new sword. It is better to use one that has already been used for a long time, with a good center of gravity and blade length. The blade of this sword was very well forged and polished. The material was an iron-based alloy. Hiro didn't know how many decades he needed to train in blacksmithing to make such a sword. It even seemed a little unfair to him that he was using magic to do it. He inquired about the availability of sword requirements. Speed was more important in her technique than heaviness. Hibana preferred to slash her opponent rather than smash. Therefore, it would be ideal to have a light sword at a range where she needed to maintain intensity, as well as shorten the length of the blade and lower the center of gravity. There were more requirements than he realized. He set to work. The object of the experiment began to bifurcate. The result was an improved version of the first sword. The new sword was made of the legendary metal mithril. That was what alchemy was all about. Hibana tested the new sword. It was magnificent in its sharpness and the ease with which it cleaved the air. The girl froze, unable to take her eyes off that cold, gleaming perfection. She felt nothing, even though she had shredded the statue. Hiro was surprised as well. Without using magical body strengthening, she was able to chop the statue in two. Hibana wanted him to see her true strength. Which was to be expected. You could tell from the look of her that she was pretty good at controlling magical power, but hadn't used it until now. The girl asked him to give her that mithril sword, to which he sharply refused. The sword belonged to Hiro, and he had given it to her for a while. He asked her not to get upset. The guy promised to make her a sword much better than this experimental one. It would be made up of supplies. Hibana was looking forward to it. She was looking forward to the sword so much that it was impossible to set her up. Hiro began the making of it. The materials he would use for the sword were special. He wouldn't be using mithril. If making a truly strong sword, he just had good materials. And they weren't metals. The fangs and skins of the monsters that Hiro used as fertilizer were similar to metal in properties. Hard, sticky, and hard to break. Just as they put magic on their swords, the monsters put magic on their own weapons. Therefore, there was a very close connection with magic power. Although it was a very powerful weapon, this magic sword made from a monster's body harmed the bearer with its miasmas. However, there were magic sword wielders who were strong enough to wield such a sword while being infected by miasmas. Eliminating miasms was the foundation of alchemy. The sphere at his hand was filled with dark energy. This crystal ball was an alchemical tool created to eliminate miasms. It was filled with miasmas to the limit. Hiro left it for the future. The preparations had been completed. Then, this material from the monster, rid of the miasma, was crushed into pieces with a special hammer that the guy made with his own hands and melted down. If one tried to do this through normal forging, one would just need a huge furnace and special chemicals. Right now, he was using 3 kinds of monsters: a large bear, a hunting dog, and a golden eagle. They were all strong monsters, and each part of them should be melted down, mixed together, and thus they would become one. Depending on the combination, the synergistic effect was enhanced. This method of making a sword by combining monsters was suggested to the prince by a respondent, so he boasted that he could make a sword equal to the sacred sword of the Principality of Kyner. The next step was to shape the sword with magic. He embodied what Hibana asked him to do. It was very beautiful. Hiro couldn't even believe that the sword would be used for killing. Now there was one last step: to apply runes on the blade that signified cutting to increase the power of the sword, and apply the enchantment. This was true alchemy. The magical power seeped into the material and strengthened its essence. With the enchantment, the sword became stronger, strengthening its core. Hiro marveled at his work. He was sure that Hibana would be pleased. It was time for Hibana Clerford's knighting ceremony. From now on, her sword belonged to Prince Hiro. She thanked him for making her the best sword ever. She had never seen such a beautiful and strong sword. She didn't seem awake to Hiro, so he asked if she liked it. The girl explained that she was a little nervous. She was afraid people would say she couldn't handle it. The prince knew that was impossible. It was probably indifferent to everyone that the third prince had such a knight serving. But Hibana, Hisa's granddaughter, was also trained in the Principality of Kyner. As a knight, there was nothing to pick on here. In fact, everyone here saw Hibana's true strength. There were definitely people here who wanted her to serve in their place. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case for them. Hibana was his friend. They shared one promise: she was his partner. His power. Finally, Hiro could start to move. He had a lot of things to do with his comrades together. But there were 2 other players who wanted action. Hibana thanked Hiro for the knight initiation and promised to cherish his sword. She had a gift for him too. She held out a plush toy. The girl called her his respondent. When he used respondent, from the outside it looked like he was talking to himself, which made it a little sad. And she wondered what would happen if he had someone for a responder. She was having a lot of fun. Hiro would still think about whether to use it or not. Hibana suddenly started practicing. She couldn't leave the prince being his knight because she has to be by his side. The point of promising to become his sword was to become the strongest. If she doesn't become stronger, then she's a cheat. Hibana knew 8 other people who were stronger than her. She needed to catch up with them. After all, she used all her free time to train. That is to say, she considered herself stronger than 4 knights from the 12 Golden Order of the Principality of Kyner. It was enough for Hiro that she was with him. They wouldn't get the Bronze Knights even if they saved up the money. It was a good thing he had Hibana. The prince asked her opinion about the sword. She replied that it was very strong. You could only kill an opponent with the sword if he wasn't using a holy or magic sword, and ignore someone with simple armor. Since she was his knight, she needed such a sword. Both of them knew that she could handle it. Hiro assumed she could practice today. He told her to get ready to leave. As soon as he announced their departure from the castle, a male figure appeared in the doorway. Hiro's brother, Agatha, inquired where they were going. The second prince saw that his brother was as busy as ever chasing popularity among the people. Being a prince, he was making new discoveries, hiding his identity by imitating the town doctor. And there were all sorts of rumors about what he would do next. Agatha came to check on what Hiro was doing after he tried to hand out wheat. Hiro knew he should have been more careful, but there was no hiding from his brother. He replied that he wasn't going to run after popularity and just wanted this kingdom to become wealthy. As it seemed to the second prince, he just wanted to eliminate him and his brother Takuma and become king. Hiro reiterated that he didn't want that. People are versed in different fields. If you take politics, Hiro is no match for him. And he thought that his brother would become king. Depending on the situation, they needed a strong king. And Takuma's older brother was brave and a good strategist. And he couldn't be one with his incomplete talent. It was difficult for him to speak in front of people. Agatha believed him. This kingdom held on because of Mayali and Hiro. The boy didn't think his brother would say such a thing. Agatha added that Hiro was jumping over his head and trying to hide what he was doing now, but he wouldn't succeed. Hiro offered to get to the main point, assuming he hadn't come to see his hated little brother. In his eyes, Hiro was still just as not cute. He had come to relay his brother's words to Takuma. Hiro would soon be 14 years old. Once he becomes an adult, he must serve the imperial family by fighting monsters. He must prepare himself. Agatha saw that he had chosen a knight, though he could have chosen a whole troop. He stated that he wasn't worried about him. It would be unbearable if he had to keep an eye on him. Hiro assured him that he was strong. Certainly not as strong as Takuma's brother. Agatha was once again convinced that he was still the same. His attention was drawn to a girl who didn't even hide her lust for killing. He suggested that she move to him. Hiro realized what he wanted. It seemed his brother needed a knight like Hibana who had reached the bronze rank. Agatha boasted that he, unlike Hiro, would be able to give her better weapons. Hibana refused as he would be bored. She decided to become Hiro's sword. Agatha accepted it. Before he left, there was something he wanted to say. If Hiro needed him, he could call for him. The third prince took back his words. That was the reason he actually came here. Agatha thought he realized that they needed to unite so that Takuma would become king and it would all be over. Hiro thought for a moment before giving his answer. In all likelihood, Agatha wanted to use him. He wanted to be above Brother Takuma in the succession. However, only he would be able to use Hiro's inventions effectively. The guy could only manufacture things. He needed a goddess power. He regarded the offer as a good one. Hiro decided to think about it. If Agatha actually wanted to help him, then his help would be useful. His brother was waiting for the right answer from him. Back at the royal castle, the log was still being waved around. Hibana was still under the impression of how flippantly Agatha had called her to join him. Hiro noticed the sincerity in him. There was enough common sense in what he offered that it wasn't a lie. The girl continued to think he was a liar. He always said bad things about Hiro. There was a gulf between them, brothers. She had never seen them be friends. The prince agreed with her. He didn't even know if he was actually their blood relative. One day his father brought him out of nowhere and told him he was his son. The brothers were naturally uncomfortable when he, a child of unknown origin, had the right to inherit the throne. Hibana remembered something he had said recently. Hiro had said he didn't want to become king. That was true. In his opinion, he was more suited to the position of a prince because he could do what he wanted. If he becomes king, he won't have time for alchemy, so he'll blame it all on his brothers. Hibana thought he would become king. She had a very good intuition. Of course, she would want to be the king's knight. The boys began to prepare for departure. Her power that she was so proud of would be needed today. They came to the Devil's Forest. Here Hibana could truly fight strong monsters. From mere training, she wasn't evolving. The girl was very excited. She was talking too loudly for a very dangerous place. There were evil monsters nesting in the Devil Forest. They were causing tremendous damage to the territory. Even if one killed a monster, its corpse couldn't be used in the future, so it would have to be left in the forest. This was a heavy burden for the kingdom of Cardarasa. Hibana felt uneasy about dressing for their stealthy sortie. It turned out Hiro had made it using alchemy. The material was the thread of an insect monster. He enchanted it in the same way as Hibana's sword. These threads had a very high defense, with a hardness similar to steel. On Hiro, the girl made sure of its durability. If it had been a simple garment, he would have died. She stated that a person who gives wrong information in life-threatening moments should die. Hibana didn't see the problem, for he didn't die. He was surprised by her character. That's what she learned in the Principality of Kiner. One could only be strong there. Hiro realized that as her master, he had to rid her of her bad habits, which wouldn't be easy. It was easy for the girl to talk to her childhood friend. That pleased him a little. Hiro hadn't yet told her why they had come here. There were two reasons. First, he wanted to see for himself what resources there were here. The girl was surprised that there were even ore deposits in this forest. The prince wanted to see what monsters were here. After all, monsters were the resources. Hibana couldn't even think that such a thing was possible. Hiro reminded her that he used monster corpses as fertilizer. The clothes they were wearing, her sword, were made from monsters. With alchemy, he could use monsters. They were the only resource their kingdom had. Hiro wished to know what monsters were here and what they could do. For that sake, they were going deep into the forest. He noticed that if things got scary, Hibana could run away. The monsters they had fought so far were weak, as they had lost the fight for territory. There was no comparison to how much stronger the monsters were waiting for them deep in the forest. Hibana couldn't run away, for she would finally be able to put this sword to the test. Hiro could see that it was very reliable. The boys reached the barricade. There were dangerous monsters ahead of them. Suddenly, the girl asked about his second reason. The prince replied that whatever was being done to save this kingdom was important. The knights could not allow the prince to enter the danger zone so easily. He mentioned his sword. Hiro also mentioned his knight, who is stronger than him. He asked to be let through on important business. The knights warned him against overzealousness. Suddenly, approaching footsteps were heard. The knights' army was heading towards the gate. Hiro realized that they needed to talk at some point anyway. He didn't want to face him this early. A powerful warrior figure stood out in the center of the army. The gaze of Takumu, the first prince of the kingdom of Cardarasa, piercing like a sharp blade, left no doubt of determination and strength. They had not expected to meet each other here. Hiro assumed that the purpose of their departure was to destroy the monsters. Takuma replied that this was a battlefield where one could not be unprepared. The third prince stated that he might as well not go back then. He came here prepared. Takuma wasn't going to help him. The most important thing is that he doesn't die. And if Hibana was here, he certainly wouldn't die. Hiro knew his knight was remarkable. His older brother turned to him seriously. He knew that they had sung together with Agatha. It was surprising since it had only been a few hours since they had met. Hiro decided that it was Agate's fault. He had specifically said that they were cooperating with him, drawing away the attention of Takuma, who didn't understand them. He asked Hiro not to do anything extra. This kingdom shouldn't be rich until the time was right. The third prince guessed that it would be when they were attacked by a neighboring country. At the moment, they weren't being invaded just because there was no value in their kingdom. They had rich land and a much larger population. The kingdom had been taken over by a neighboring country. The last remaining territory was adjacent to the Devil Forest. If there was anything of value in this territory, the belligerent neighboring countries would definitely take it away. His brother was going to take back the captured land at the right time, but they had two different military strengths, and even if he took back the land, they wouldn't be able to defend it. Takuma wished to take back the land that provided most of the food for the kingdom. If those lands were returned, food and population would increase and most of the kingdom's problems would be solved. The problem was retaliation after the land was returned. It was impossible to win a frontal war with a country with twice the population. But Takuma probably had a card that could win in the short term, not a completely doomed plan. Right now, he was just saving up his strength. He would surely execute the plan, unless they did something unnecessary. But if the enemy found out and attacked before he made his decision, it would all be over. Takuma warned that if they got in his way, he wouldn't look at the fact that they were his brothers. Only he would be able to help the kingdom, and then there would be their work with Agatha, where he was powerless. To him, they were smart and strange, but also the kingdom needed them. Therefore, he would not kill them. Takuma's words sounded very stern, so for a while the boys continued to walk in silence. Hiro sighed tensely. His brother's warning was very harsh, but he wasn't going to let up. The only way to make the kingdom rich was to win the war. In a way, it was the right thing to do. Agatha's brother knew what Takuma was going to do, so he was wary. There was little chance of defeating the neighboring countries, and they wouldn't be able to keep winning. He knew this and thought that if left to Takuma, they would perish. So Agatha offered to help the hated hero even if he was going to stop him. Agatha and Takuma were going to save the kingdom in different ways. He wanted to become a vassal of a strong country so that it would protect them from neighboring countries. From Agatha's point of view, nothing could be done about the hindrance in the form of Takuma. Ironic that the two brothers feuded with each other, and in their own way tried to save the kingdom, though their desires were the same. Hibana remained in suspense. She knew at first sight that Takuma was powerful, but it's different when he's armed and on the battlefield. Hiro understood her, for he was the strongest man in the kingdom. The girl thought he could defeat even a knight from the Golden Order if they had the same weapons. The prince knew he was strong, but not to that extent. If Takuma was actually going to kill him, Hiro thought, she would fight him. But would she win? The knight replied that it would take 3 minutes. Hiro decided to avoid a violent confrontation with his brother. Otherwise, the girl would give the prince time to escape. He took that as a hint of how he would die. If there was a way to avoid conflict, Hiro wanted to avoid it. He needed Agatha's brother to spread his inventions, just as he needed Takuma and his army, once the inventions spread and their kingdom became wealthy. He wanted to provide his brother's army with strong weapons made by alchemy. And he also wanted to take back the lands they had captured. They would have the military power to take back and protect the lands. Hiro wanted the strength of Takuma and his army. He admired his brothers, but they were difficult to communicate with. The boys were almost out of reach of the sun's rays. Finally, they began to look for monsters. Because of Takuma's appearance, they were interrupted on one topic. Hibana couldn't wait to find out the second reason. Hiro was about to voice it. It was salt. The boys traveled to this gloomy forest to mine salt, which could be the key to saving the kingdom. Habana assumed they would have to go to the stony mine of the Devil's Forest to do so. However, Hiro knew of the existence of a sea beyond the forest, drawn on the great alchemist's map. The girl rejoiced, for if this map was true, they would be able to mine as much salt as they wanted. The neighboring kingdoms only had rock salt, so they would be able to tap into a new market. So what they had to think about was not whether there really was a sea, but about the fact that it was definitely there, and how to make a safe road. That was important. Not only were there dangerous monsters in this forest, but the roads here were terrible. This forest was dangerous even for ordinary soldiers, so Hiro constructed a compass. To this compass, he added a magic arrow. He wanted to combine searching with checking this compass. This compass determined the current location thanks to these two stones that show the same direction. It didn't work from a magnet, but from magic. Hiro was glad that he was able to check that a normal compass didn't work. Habana calmed down. She didn't want to think about trouble. She was afraid of monsters, after all. Think of a monster, and it would show up. This was a great chance. Hiro told his friend to watch his fight and not to help him. Even though she was his protector, she should know about his abilities. From transformed gunpowder and mithril, he created weapons. The guy made a bow out of mithril and an arrow out of gunpowder. In addition to that, he learned how to analyze. In his own right eye, Hiro added magical vision. This spell gave an increase in the inside of the eye. If one invested magic, one could gain the ability to predict and see through a creature. The next step was X-ray. The skill allowed one to know the monster's muscle structure, center of gravity. Hiro saw the next moves. He added wind. When the enemy began to approach, Hiro, having gone through all the steps, abruptly released an arrow from his bow. The arrow, like lightning, pierced the air, heading towards the target. There was a deafening explosion. According to Habana's assumption, Hiro had anticipated the monster's jump and blasted it. That one sealed the magical power, and in one hit, that power reacted to the gunpowder. It was a very survivable monster. If he didn't do that, they wouldn't have a chance to win. For the next monster, he prepared a magic spear. The girl was surprised that he wasn't a swordsman. Hiro replied that he was an alchemist and used everything he made himself. The bow is for long range, the spear is for medium range, and the sword is for close range. And if they got too close, there was a knife. For defense, a shield. For a powerful blow, he used a hammer. Hiro could also create weapons of 1,000 faces. He performed a mithril magic transformation. Habana resented having a weapon that could change was against the rules, but it just suited him. If he only had one type of weapon, he wouldn't get far with her sword, and Hiro would become a liability. The next monster was much stronger than its predecessors. Habana, gritting her teeth, stepped forward. Her eyes burned with determination as the monster's sharp claws swept towards her. Instead of retreating, she intercepted them with her sword. Her movements were honed to perfection. With a single strike, she stripped the monster of its limbs. The girl's actions drew admiration from Hiro, who was watching the fight. He saw that they had different concepts of values, but that didn't stop him from admiring her strength. He didn't even have time to sigh, and yet she had beautiful sword technique. Hiro asked if everyone in the Principality of Kenner was a monster like her. Habana again mentioned 8 people who were stronger than her, and yet Hiro considered them a threat to them. The girl was surprised, for they were not feuding at the time. The prince explained that they were now. Cartarasa's current kingdom was of no interest to them. That would change when he enriched this kingdom. They could destroy Cartarasa while it was weak and take all his inventions. so strengthening the kingdom was just as important as enriching it. Hiro wanted a reference point. So strong a kingdom that can defeat the principality of Kiner. If they can become like that, they won't lose to anyone. What was expected of the prince? He thought of such things. She suggested taking the monster sharp claws. The guy had a special miasma bag for this occasion. If he didn't have one, those miasmas could kill them. It would take magic to process them, and Hiro wanted to save it for more necessary things in this forest. Hibana dragged a weight of 30 kilograms on her back, a testament to her incredible strength. Hiro wasn't done exploring this forest yet. She wished they had come across a stronger monster. He told her that that bear was called Blade Bear. It was said that anyone who met it would die. It had an A rank of danger and was an extremely dangerous monster. But Hibana was much stronger. Hiro felt that she was a very reliable knight. As long as she was with him, he definitely couldn't be killed. They reached the sea, which spread out before them in all its glory. The girl couldn't contain her smile, her eyes shining with delight. Hiro saw it as a source of salt. If they could bring the salt from here, they could make money from the neighboring countries. They had walked here for half a day, and it had been worth it. He wondered how much more Hibana could carry. She was capable of taking another 50 kilograms. For the girl to be able to save him, she couldn't load herself too much. Hiro decided that they would take 100 kilograms of salt with them. He would take half of the load. Hibana thought it wasn't necessary to take that much at one time, but he calculated that if they took 100 kilograms with them, it would be a good gift to the kingdom. The annual salt consumption per person was about 1.5 kilograms. 1,000 people needed 1.5 tons of salt, so if they brought 100 each 15 times, they could replenish the kingdom's annual salt supply. To make it less of a problem, Hiro would be a little reckless. He hoped they could collect the salt before the end of the day. Now was the time to act. Hibana could help a little later. After shedding her outer clothing, she decided to fish while she waited. Hiro was surprised that she didn't feel the least bit embarrassed. A moment later, she was already holding a silvery fish. The prince remembered that there was a sea near the principality of Kiner. Hibana had offered him a swim. What mattered most to him was what he had come for. Hiro had made a glass pool out of sand. It would take many days if they made the pool the normal way. He tried not to be distracted by the girl. Hiro made a hose out of his guts. It wasn't very pleasant to look at. Then they would fill the pool with water. It was necessary for the hose to be completely in the water. The water poured by itself, not because of magic, but science. It went on the principle of a siphon. Water flowed from the sea with a high water level into the pool with a low water level. Hiro would then convert the seawater into salt. Hibana was worried that it was wasting a lot of magic. Hiro explained that they couldn't wait for the water to dry on its own, so nothing could be done. The first attempt was a success. Hibana couldn't contain her excitement. She didn't understand why Hiro was adding water again. The salt content of seawater was only 4%, and he knew how much water he needed to pour in to fill the pool completely. He had studied it in science class. So it would be more efficient to collect the salt by increasing its concentration and quantity. Still, as he thought, it's difficult to release so much magic so many times. During the difficult task, Hibana was showing her concern. She worried that he wouldn't overwork himself and took care of the food. Very soon, Hiro was going to finish the job. If they didn't get this together now, all efficiency would be lost. He asked Hibana to help him gather the salt. This bag was also made through alchemy. It could stretch a lot. Working together was speeding up the process of gathering salt. If doing it without alchemy, it would take a week. Hibana had no idea how much training it took to increase magic power like that. Hiro noticed that he was born with so much magic. He had an amazing amount of magic power from birth. It was simply a miracle that he had so much magic and a responder. The more the responder injected magic, the more information could be obtained. Hiro was the only one who could use it to its fullest potential. Hibana thought he could gather all the salt with magic. The prince was worried that he might not have enough magic to get back through the devil forest, so he would have to work with his hands. The girl took it as an opportunity to practice, since she had to carry the sacks and walk through the forest. She had heard something recently. A prince of some country was building new paths with peasants. Thinking back to herself, Hiro called him a strange man. Hearing that, Hibana thought that maybe she could do that too. Training her body and helping people at the same time was great. Hiro was embarrassed that it had even gotten to her, and at the same time he was glad. He decided to glorify her as a heroine, even though she thought it was absurd. She was just helping him. Hiro knew there was a sea here, and that salt could be made, but he never did anything about it. He couldn't go through the devil's forest alone. But Hibana went with him, and now they could give people salt. So he was grateful to her. He embarrassed the girl, but she was very happy. She thanked him too, and was glad to be his knight, because he would actually be able to save the kingdom. The boys went back to take the salt to the people. By this time, night had fallen and the forest was plunged into darkness. Hibana discovered the light of the barricade. There still seemed to be plenty of strength in her, but the girl was already tired. Even in the moonlight, she could walk. Hiro hadn't trained her eyesight, so she used magic. Hibana noticed that they hardly encountered any monsters on the way back. This was due to Hiro using a special perfume. Thus, she couldn't smell sweat. It was the most hated odor for monsters, so they stopped approaching them. The trial sample became effective. She reasoned that if she used it when traveling, it would be much easier. Right now, Hiro applied it because he decided to check out what monsters were here. If he could, he wouldn't want to let those spirits go to waste. But because of things and fatigue, it was dangerous not to. There were 11 kinds of monsters living in the forest. 3 kinds these spirits didn't work on. There were monsters here for whom this odor was not disgusting, and who had no sense of smell. He had learned a great deal. Hiro wanted ordinary soldiers to be able to pass through this forest safely using the perfume, and that was also the purpose of the test. He learned about monsters, tested the compass, found the sea, made salt, and tested the spirits. This day was a hard day. But perhaps now the most important thing would begin. When they met the prince, the knights were overjoyed. They had been very worried. Hiro apologized for such a time, but he had to go to the castle right away. He knew the brothers were awake. The boy asked him to tell Takuma and Agatha that he had salt. The man who wants to save this country couldn't wait until tomorrow. The 2 brothers were gathered around the table, their eyes fixed on one point. There was a tense silence in the room. Suddenly, the door opened, and Hiro entered the room. He had summoned them, but had come in late himself. The boys were delayed, as they had to change their clothes. Agatha asked if salt had anything to do with it. They were concerned that he had found salt. Everyone here had their own dream. First Prince Takuma Katarasa was skilled in military, and was the strongest man in the kingdom. His goal was to save the kingdom by force. He wanted to reclaim the rich land stolen by neighboring kingdoms, and the people living on it. The second prince, Agatha Katarasa, was very intelligent and calculating. His goal was to save the kingdom by diplomacy. He wanted the kingdom to become a vassal of another powerful country. and Hiro Cardarasa was as good as his brothers. The third prince's position as a spare brother. He could do what he wanted up to this point, but he would jump at the chance to give salt to the people. So Hiro will fight for his dream today. Takuma asked bluntly where this salt came from. Every eye was fixed on the third prince. There was anticipation in the air. Hiro said that on the sea beyond the Devil's Forest, he built a pool and steamed the salt. He realized how many people were dying because of the salt. Because of the salt, they were commanded by neighboring countries. They sold treasure to buy it. If they didn't have enough, they got rid of the food. That's why their people were starving to death. Their kingdom badly needed salt. Lying about salt was nothing but mocking those who shed tears. Hiro wasn't rotten enough to lie about salt. Takuma jumped to conclusions. He praised his brother. For a man who aimed to be the next king, recognizing his accomplishments was a bad move. It wasn't what Hiro had expected, but now was a good time to ask him. Together with Abana, they could go through the Devil Forest, but no one but them was in a position to do so. If something happened to them, they wouldn't be able to deliver the salt, and they couldn't be without it. Hiro asked to give them his army. Takuma decided to select his best fighters tomorrow, and he would go with them. Hiro would have to lead them. Hiro felt his heart race with joy when his brother agreed. Now, he could count on soldiers trained personally by his brother. He felt relieved that he hadn't been asked about any of this. Agatha, however, reacted with apprehension. In the Devil Forest, it was very easy to get lost and get killed by the clutches of dangerous monsters. They couldn't let their soldiers die in vain. Unlike Takuma's reaction, this was something Hiro could easily understand. He had achieved great results. Takuma wanted to organize a steady supply of salt. Agatha, on the other hand, was not interested in that. But he had to be convinced or there would be a lot of problems. Hiro informed him that he had created magical devices for that purpose. With a magic compass that could find their way back, they wouldn't get lost. And if they used those spirits, 3 kinds of monsters out of 11 wouldn't approach them. The remaining 3 species would probably be handled by the best units. Hiro prepared information about the monsters and their weaknesses. What to do about the new types of monsters, he didn't know. There was nothing he could do about it yet. Takuma supported him. Hiro and his knight walked the entire way together. They confirmed the compass and spirits were working. Besides, couldn't his army do what Hiro was able to do? If that was what Agatha meant, he would take it as an insult. Agatha suspected that Hiro might have been lying. With that much salt, Takuma was convinced there was a sea beyond this forest. They could save their subjects. Agata grudgingly agreed. He knew that getting salt had a high priority. But how did Hiro know there was a sea beyond the forest? Agatha couldn't go to such a dangerous place without being sure. Did Hiro explore everything since he found the sea? He must have had a reason for such confidence. Especially how he was able to create so much salt in one day, and why he had made the tools to travel through the forest. Agatha suspected it was for a reason. His younger brother had always been unbelievable and frightening, but this was over the top. Agatha demanded an explanation or he wouldn't believe him. This time, Takuma agreed with him. For a conversation like this, they should have gotten rid of the witnesses. Hiro demanded that the guards be released. It was time to tell the truth. Even though the guards stood outside the door, he was uneasy. His father had once told him he was adopted. He didn't know if they saw him as a little brother. Hiro was afraid of the power they were showing. Not only that, he and his brothers had a different understanding of saving their kingdom. They understood this. Though they were brothers, they were each other's enemies. But for Hiro's wish to come true, he needed the power of these two It would be a mistake to hide his power from them, which might still be needed. So he would reveal his secret. The brothers wanted to save the kingdom. If they were sure that his help would save the kingdom, then he would give them his support. Hiro believed in the brothers' love for their kingdom. That's why he had to convince them that this power would help them. The boy reported that he received the alchemist's legacy and mastered alchemy. He created his tools with alchemy and learned about the sea from the map that was in that inheritance. Both of them didn't utter a word. Now they could banish Hiro from the kingdom. Takuma was hopeful. He realized that alchemy was forbidden by the church. Hiro knew how his choice might turn out, but he was willing to risk himself to save the kingdom. If they did nothing, it would die. The brothers should have realized this. Individually, they were fighting a battle with no chance of victory. This they could not ignore. Hiro knew of Takuma's desire to gather a squad of soldiers with magical weapons and attack the neighboring countries. In that, he appeared to be right. He also knew that it would be followed by a terrifying breakdown of power and brutal retribution. And Agatha was going to ask other powerful countries for protection to save the country by selling it. Hiro correctly calculated his moves as well. Agatha believed that there was no other way to save their kingdom, and it was better than what this jock was offering. Hiro didn't think it would make a difference. The kingdom had already given away their sister, and thus prolonged their existence. And to save themselves, they needed to take the next step. They had nothing. That's what it meant to belong to someone. Agatha thought diplomacy was what was needed to avoid that. He might be able to pull it off, but Hiro saw the limit. Everything he was doing was prolonging their lives. There was no way for them to save the kingdom this way. Hiro had given up on their plans. The thought of him saving the kingdom with alchemy sounded crazy. The guy realized that since he had given up on their ideas, he needed to be shown another way out. They had gotten more than just salt. He was going to show them the power of alchemy. A woman appeared in the doorway. Hidden in her hands was something wrapped in a soft cloth. Hiro ordered her to let her through. Under the cloth was freshly baked white bread. The brothers were amazed because there was no wheat growing in Cardarasa. They took it as a deception. However, Hiro showed them the power of alchemy. The bread was baked from wheat grown in their kingdom. The monster's body was good at making fertilizer. Plus, this wheat could withstand cold and disease, and it grew in 3 months. He could lead them to the fields. With alchemy, he could do more than that. Hiro suggested they try bread made only from wheat. They took the first bite. The bread turned out to be incredibly delicious. Takuma didn't realize that their kingdom could have such delicious bread. Not only was the wheat easy to grow, but it tasted good. The bread was much more flavorful than other countries. Alchemy could do such a thing as well. Not only did it make life richer, Hiro was about to demonstrate Hibana's sword. The girl bothered to make sure it was returned. Takuma raised the sword above him, and his eyes widened in amazement. He couldn't believe he was holding something so powerful in his hands. There was no miasma in this sword. It couldn't be compared to their swords. It was much stronger. Takuma realized this at a glance. And it was once again an achievement of alchemy. From his squad's magical swords, Hiro could remove all the miasma. He decided he'd rather make swords that would surpass them. The prince reiterated that he was abandoning Takuma's idea of war and Agat's idea of a colony. He would make this kingdom rich through alchemy. They had salt, wheat, swords. He would show them a rich kingdom that could defend itself against other countries. With all of this, they would be able to defend themselves, and Hiro wanted more than just protection. Their subjects had suffered enough. They had a right to be happy too. He wasn't satisfied with just eliminating hunger. His goal was to make the kingdom prosperous. They were silent in amazement. A chuckle broke out. The older brothers laughed amicably. Hiro was only confused, unable to understand the reason for their mirth. They realized that their sacrifices with their lives would have been in vain. Hiro had gotten support. What they were trying to do was only a reprieve. They would not be able to achieve the prosperity of the kingdom. They realized that deep in their hearts, but there was no way they wanted to give up. But the way he wanted to save the kingdom. Agatha felt something strange. He should be happy that the kingdom would be saved. But he felt bitter. Even though he was laughing, it was obvious that he was sad. Hiro had revealed his secret to them because he saw them wanting to save the kingdom. The form was different, but the meaning was the same. So he asked not to be told that he could do it alone, or that everything they had done before was pointless. Hiro needed their help. He would be able to make this country rich, but he wouldn't be able to command everyone and fight like Takumu, and he wouldn't be able to inspire people and negotiate with neighboring countries. Alchemy was useful, but nothing would work without proper use. He needed the strength of his brothers. They realized that he had decided to use them, and they weren't going to follow him so easily. However, Hiro had meant for them to use him. He believed in them, in their strength and intelligence. If they teamed up, they could save their kingdom. Hiro could work in the shadows. It was necessary for them to stay with him. It would be up to them to decide who would be the next king. The brothers looked at each other, exchanging thoughts without words. They realized what he really meant. Takuma realized that the situation was hopeless. If his younger brother said such a thing, he could not, like a child, remain silent. His army would support Hiro. He would act as a general, not a prince. Agatha would also help him. Even if he was losing to him in abilities, or Hiro just happened to have the alchemist's legacy, he didn't want to follow him. But if their ship was sinking, he had no choice but to help him. He promised to help in his goal and become a minister. Hiro decided to clarify what they meant. Takuma had given up the throne in his favor. So had Agatha. They felt it was best for the kingdom. Simply put, they recognized him. They will keep quiet about alchemy as long as he believes in himself. He can save their kingdom, and they will help him. The brothers asked if he believed them. If Hiro doubted their truth, they would take it as an insult. He asked them to help him. The boys assured him that he could rely on them. For the first time, the three princes of Cardarasa were united. It was just the beginning, except it wasn't to save the kingdom of Cardarasa, but to prosper it. Hiro was certain that once united, nothing was impossible for them. Unsubstantiated, but such confidence was. Hiro stretched lazily. He was tired from negotiating with his brothers, which he didn't really like. Already this morning, Takuma's squad was preparing to march into the forest. Hiro was happy with their association. He was unable to perform a number of tasks necessary to strengthen the kingdom. To his brothers, Hiro could confidently trust them with matters in which they were strong. But there was one problem. Because they gave up the throne, he automatically became the next king. Agatha took the usual job, but there was still a job that only required a king. Hibana was still in awe of what had happened yesterday. She decided to call him king. But Hiro wanted her to call him by his first name. The girl realized that she hadn't seen the king once since she had returned. It turned out that his father was now ill and had been in a coma for the past year. Takuma was supposed to act as king temporarily, but since his older brothers had given up the throne, he would now be acting as king. Since there is a possibility that his father will wake up, it was impossible to arbitrarily choose a king. Thus, One of the reasons for the instability in the kingdom was the regency. Hibana answered as if he was a stranger, and he didn't like that. If Hiro was going to be very busy, she would be too. Depending on further events, an assassin could be sent. The girl realized that she needed to train more and get stronger, but she didn't know what to do with a sparring partner. If you train alone, you can't jump above your own head. She asked if he knew anyone strong. Hiro thought that Takumu, who was also looking for a training partner, would fit that role. Hibana wondered if it was possible to defeat him using alchemy. Hiro knew that even if he used a good weapon with magical transformation, his brother would still break it. He was unusual, strong and skilled. Hiro thought she was no match for him. He apologized for being blunt. Takuma was a military genius and excelled in military strategy, but most importantly in his personal fighting power. When there had been a skirmish with a neighboring country, Hiro had noticed a five-fold difference in strength. When he said that, Hibana all the more couldn't help but challenge him. He noticed that she had changed after all. The girl asked him who baked that bread. She knew wheat was good, but to be able to make such delicious bread from it. Hiro soon wanted to introduce her to a secret employee. In response to her suspicions, he explained that there was nothing between them. Takuma was worried that they had lost their way. Judging by the compass, they were on the right track. Hibana had confused it with a bear. The knights had a lot of equipment with them. Hiro expected only to look at the sea and return. But they would camp near the sea, for the warriors needed strength and time to make salt. It wasn't just about the knights. Takuma was going to recruit men to escort them. There were about 50 unemployed knights in the kingdom. The remaining knights worked in the kingdom's fields. They didn't have time to train. Instead of sending profile knights to mine salt, it would be more efficient to build a base and accompany the real miners to the sea. Takuma wondered if he could build a road with his strength. There were too many trees and grass here, making it difficult to walk. And the blind spots were immense, for one would need to defend oneself heavily. It was unclear how many years it would take to build a road in the Devil's Forest. Hiro thought that they would need the road for more than just transporting salt. People would need good food, and someday a port would need to be built for fishing. On that basis, a road was vital. A road that could carry the big wagons carrying the ship's cargo. It would be good to make it safe. But in order to build the road, they had to, while fighting off monsters, cut down trees and prepare areas for the road, which is about 20 kilometers. Hiro couldn't even imagine how much strength he would need to work without getting tired. But if they were wrong, did they have to go through a dangerous Devil's Forest? They just wanted a safer road to the sea, after all. The prince asked me to rely on him. Before winter began, he would do something. With only 3 months left, he knew he would meet the deadline. Hibana had a bad feeling. Together with a troop of knights, they walked out to the sea. It was the first time the men had seen a body of water whose vast waters were lost in the haze of the horizon, blending into the sky. The sun had already begun to set, and it was a long walk because of the large number of people, but it was still beautiful. Fortunately, they didn't meet the night in the Devil's Forest. The faces of the best battle-hardened soldiers shone with childlike delight at the sight of the blue sea. After breaking camp, Takuma released them. They set about preparing the camp and dinner. The knights were very cheerfully setting up the tents. They were so excited from across the sea. Takuma called Hiro and Hibana to go fishing with him. Instead of eating canned food, they could enjoy the gifts of the sea. The fishing spot was a small cliff. The process was going smoothly. There were no people here, and the fish were easily caught due to their carelessness. The girl asked if she could eat the fish she had caught. It was poisonous, but Hiro could extract the poison. If the fish had a weak poison, Takumu didn't mind eating it at all. Looking into their happy faces, he turned to his brother. He had given up the throne in favor of Hiro, but not all of his subordinates seemed to accept it yet. Hiro realized that everyone admired Takuma's strength. They had never thought they would obey him. But he was powerless to change anything. Takuma knew that the soldiers needed a show of strength. Hiro didn't know what to do. Challenging his brother to a duel seemed like a crazy idea. But Takuma appreciated it. Hiro realized that this way he would never see a prosperous kingdom, because it would be impossible to defeat him. Even if they conspired, they would be exposed immediately. Takuma had already trained them. He had a suggestion. The king's personal knights could fight in the royal duels. So Hibana could defeat him. A personal knight's strength is the king's strength. The girl is weaker than him, so he would train her. He was going to do it anyway. They needed Hiro who could withstand everything. But his personal knight couldn't be weak. Hibana herself realized that it would be nice to train with Takuma and surpass him. Takuma asked if she regretted that because of that. Hibana stated that she had no right to regret because of their difference in strength. Rather, she was glad for the opportunity to become stronger. But it would take time to get stronger. He couldn't wait. So the duel would be in a week. And if she failed, Hiro would help with weapons made by alchemy. The two of them could defeat him, and Hiro would be accepted as a strong king. The guys accepted his offer. Takuma had one more thing to say. This was his test for him. Hiro said he would make the kingdom stronger with alchemy. If he doesn't show him that this girl can beat him, then he won't believe in his alchemy. Takuma urged him to remember that. Hiro agreed with him. He was sure he would definitely prove it to him. By then, the knights had finished folding out their tents, so they could start cooking dinner. The friends were left alone. Previously, Hiro had said that 3 minutes against her brother would be enough, meaning they only had to buy time. She would train with Takuma, but it was impossible to take away their strength difference in this week. Hibana looked at this with a positive outlook. After all, for an alchemist like him, nothing was uninteresting. Hiro had to come up with a weapon that could surpass his brother. It kept him on his toes. The knights gathered around a crackling fire. Hiro explained the plan where they would clear the beach in the morning and start making a salt field. He also wrote out how to make the tools and encouraged them to follow the instructions. Tomorrow, they would have to leave the knights alone. Hiro felt some distance between him and his brother's soldiers. He wouldn't use that pool, as the salt had to be mined without magic, so people who didn't use magic could mine it themselves. They were back to the beginning anyway. A lot of work had been added. But Hiro still thought it was necessary. Takuma said that if she didn't defeat him, he wouldn't say that his alchemy could save the kingdom. If they don't have such a big difference in strength with other countries, they can do everything. The soldiers along with Takuma were enjoying the sea fish. Originally, weapons were made for the weak. The most perfect weapon is one that anyone can use and kill anyone. It used to be assumed that if a country was rich, there would be someone who would attack it. Therefore, they prepared powerful weapons. According to his basic tactics, the first thing to do was to reduce the enemy's strength. And Takuma, with his incredible strength and knights, would strike the final blow. Hibana was of course grateful for making strong weapons, but she wanted to defeat him with her own strength. Hiro also wanted her to outdo her brother. Not necessarily in a duel. After it, she would keep practicing and someday surpass him. Hibana made a promise. She didn't know how long it would take, but she would become the strongest. If she didn't, she wouldn't be worthy. The girl wanted to be worthy of him. There was a flicker of uncertainty in the boy's eyes, as if he was trying to read something in her gaze, but couldn't catch the meaning. He noted that it was good that she was so confident. He sensed a strange atmosphere. Hibana inquired about his plan. Hiro wanted to build a road between the sea and the kingdom in just 3 months. He was only saying what he could do. He would find time later to work out a plan. The weapons couldn't be forgotten, which needed to be done this week. Tomorrow morning, Hiro would finish the plan for the road, and after that he would start building it. And while building it, he would think about its weapons. During the day, he would build the road and think about it, and in the evening, he would start making his prototype. Coming up with a plan in his head was his forte, and then he would write it down and think out the details. Tomorrow, they would return to the castle where he would begin work. Hiro had asked to help him. He would tell her his plan after they went through the Devil Forest again, thinking it was good training. He surprised her every time. The boys decided to give it their best shot. Noon the next day, near the beginning of the Devil's Forest. They had dumped all the paperwork on Agath, and now they could start building the road. Hibana asked if they would go into the Devil's Forest. They were having trouble cutting down the Devil Forest, so Hiro decided that if they couldn't go through the forest, they would go here. If you don't want to go through the forest, then don't. What he would be building was more properly called not a road. It was a tunnel. Hibana thought that was an even crazier idea, but Hiro was quick to dissuade her. Alchemy is the manipulation of matter. Sand was especially good at combining with earth. The harder you dig, the deeper the hole gets. And he'd dig at an incline so the wagon could move without problems. And when they reached a certain depth, he would start going horizontally, making a path to the sea. Making a tunnel, they didn't have to worry about trees and monsters. In yesterday's hike, Hiro had discovered that there was no underground water here. True, he didn't know if there were underground monsters here. They would get worried when the monsters showed up. Hibana couldn't believe that she had seen tunnel construction by alchemy. Hiro was planning to do more this time. The girl was afraid that the ceiling might collapse. However, he calculated that if you hit the wall, it would be very hard due to the compression of the earth by the alchemy. It couldn't be compared to bricks. It was very strong and water wouldn't pass through, so the ceiling wouldn't collapse. When this road is built, everyone will be able to walk safely from the city to the sea. They will not only be able to produce salt, but also to fish. Because of the predatory fishing in the lake near the kingdom, it has become almost impossible to catch fish. And by fishing in the sea, the food will become richer and the people more satisfied. Hibana was looking forward to this day. She was happy to see him happy. Still, it took a lot of magical power. She didn't think she could handle that kind of work. Hiro had already said that he was born this way, but he didn't hide the fact that it was hard for him too. According to his calculations, wagons with 2 horses should be able to pass through freely. That's the minimum requirement for a tunnel. Therefore, it was 8 meters wide and 3.5 meters high. It required a large amount of magical power. Hibana wanted to help, but she didn't know how. Hiro wanted her to remove the earth and rocks. Earth compression had its own limit, and wanted to avoid the accumulation of residual earth and rocks. Force work suited her. In order not to run out of energy before the evening training, Hiro had advised her not to overdo it. But this girl was a workout enthusiast. He realized that if she got sick, he would need to back her up. They continued their work as cheerfully as before. Everything depended on Hiro's strength, and he didn't know how long it would last. The construction of the tunnel was going at an incredible speed. They worked as a single mechanism to achieve a common goal. The work was very exhausting. They were done for the day. If Hiro continued any further, there wouldn't be enough energy for the evening's work. They had walked 600 meters, more than he thought. Hibana was very tired. Thanks to her, he was only able to concentrate on making the tunnel, for which he was grateful. She had noticed something. The shadow of dragging earth gets you very tired. The farther they dug, the greater was the distance to remove the excess earth. It was a very good workout for muscles and stamina. At their pace, the work would take about a month, though they had 3. Hiro was counting on 2 months. They wouldn't stop at just digging the tunnel. The wall had to be checked and reinforced first. He wouldn't let it collapse. When they were done with that, they would need a device to keep water out. And if water does show up, they'll need a drain. They'll also need lights. A device to circulate fresh air. And it would take more than 2 months to get all that done. There was a lot of work to be done. Hibana wondered if they had to do all that. Hiro remarked that they didn't need a road to carry only salt. She was needed beyond that. And she also looked tired before her upcoming training session with Takuma tonight. The girl, if keeping on her feet, claimed she was fine. Hiro motioned for her to open her mouth. He had created a special remedy for situations like this. She screamed as if she had tasted the worst thing in the world. Hiro turned away to hide his laughter. He wondered if her body had gotten lighter. In fact, it had gained an incredible lightness. The fatigue-removing pills were also made by alchemy. If one used them too much, there would be an excessive strain on the body. They couldn't be used for nothing. And the reason for that was a possible war. He didn't want to waste the stockpile. The medicine could bring the soldiers back to combat readiness in a short time and would be a salvation for them. Today was a special case. If he couldn't see the difference between Hibana and his brother, he wouldn't be able to make a normal weapon. If she was tired, she wouldn't be able to train either. She had time to think that she could work until she collapsed and drink this medicine to recover quickly and go to training. That was courageous of her. The girl gave thanks for such a valuable medicine. It was time to go back. Before going back, she wanted to ask him a question. She had a request. Could she become his lover? Hiro was confused, not knowing what to answer. In such an environment, Hibana suddenly declared that she had fallen in love with him. That's why she decided to confess to him. She realized that she couldn't be his queen. He could keep their relationship a secret. She wouldn't say such a thing just to please a man. The girl had genuinely fallen in love with him at that meeting where he had the courage to go up against 2 brothers. That's why she was saying it. She waited for his response. Hibana hadn't met anyone yet, but she thought they could handle it. Humans are animals too. You just have to trust your instincts. Hiro felt a traitorous blush flood his cheeks. He turned away and said he needed time to think it over. Hibana was willing to wait. After all, patience is one of the main advantages of swordsmen. The prince was perplexed as to why she would confess so suddenly. Marriage for royal families was just a tool to strengthen relations with other countries. With a poor country like theirs, it was unlikely that anyone would want to marry, so there was no problem. He remembered the strength, beauty, intelligence of a girl was something to talk about. The boy decided they needed to get to know each other better. On the castle grounds, the knight's training was in full swing. Stepping into the arena, the guys were met with serious looks. The knights had probably heard about the duel and were interested in Hibana's strength. The training fights were controlled by Takuma. To see the girl's strength, he chose Harold as her opponent. His gaze spoke of his readiness for any challenge. He seemed to find something exciting about fighting. Takuma himself was not going to fight her because of his strength. Hibana decided to show him her strength. She was confident of her victory. Takuma let Harold not hold back. He knew roughly what she was capable of. But it wasn't her he was more interested in. The opponents stood across from each other, their gazes crossed like two blades. According to the rules of battle, using wooden swords, they would fight until the first blow. Hibana accepted the terms. Hiro could feel Harold burning from within, as if the power itself flowed in his veins. Undoubtedly, he was among the top 12 in the squad. If magical power smoothly enveloped the body, one's physical abilities could be enhanced. The battle began, and both opponents seemed to be off the chain. Already in the beginning the girl showed herself, and he barely had time to block her blow. Hibana was like a shadow. Her movements were fast and unpredictable. Harold was trapped, surrounded by her attacks. He had no choice but to defend himself. Spinning around him, she provided a good stance in which to attack. The girl was holding up well, fending off the attacks well, but needed to take her down with a punch. Finally, Harold went on the offensive. He made the first attack, knocking her off balance. He wasn't inferior to Hibana's speed. The blow looked heavy. Besides, her tactics were very tiring. Harold decided it was his time. He rushed forward, preparing to deliver a decisive blow. But at the last moment, like a shadow, she darted over him, avoiding the attack. As she left, she was able to strike. In that second, Harold realized he had lost. She had proven her strength, and he couldn't help but recognize that. Takuma praised both of them. From his observations, Hibana was strong in her own way. He asked to borrow her sword again. He handed his sword to Hiro, placing its hilt in the young man's palm, and coldly ordered him to hold it tightly. Hiro didn't know what was going on, but something inside told him it was for a reason. In the next instant, Takuma, powerful and muscular as a rock, rushed forward to attack. Hiro froze in place, his eyes widening in horror. Takuma decided to test how strong his sword was compared to the one his brother had made. All that escaped from Hiro's throat was a suppressed squeak. Takuma came to the conclusion that his sword was now just trash. He wanted to test their weapons before they fought. During their battle, Hibana would lose if they fought with wooden swords, and if with real weapons, this would happen. The girl didn't like that he kept underestimating her. She suspected he planned to win by taking her blow. Takuma was sure of his win. She didn't need his condescension. He offered to prove it by winning it. If she did that, the next fight would be without leniency. But if she could, a mixture of rage and a thirst to prove she was stronger than anyone could imagine boiled up inside her. Hibana was determined to win. At first, she had just wanted to see the difference in their strength, but now she wanted to win. She was getting pretty pissed off. Takuma was acting rather provocative. Hiro didn't think he was actually underestimating Hibana. The girl's furious gaze met Takuma's icy stare. The battle had begun. She, infuriated by their dialogue, lunged forward sharply. But Takuma was faster, having anticipated her maneuver. In an instant, her legs gave out and she collapsed to the ground, stunned and defeated. Hiro had been mistaken. He thought that Takuma's brother would start first and Hibana would just defend, but he did the opposite. He let Hibana attack. He dodged easily and threw a punch. Keeping the right distance and understanding your opponent's pace is the foundation for swordsmen. This was not a victory of speed or strength, but of skill. From the start, Takuma didn't have a plan. It was just an overwhelming difference in strength. He said she had pretty good physical fitness. She was putting in enough effort, but she was only relying on her talent, and he couldn't tolerate complacency. She only thought of herself and didn't see her opponent. I lacked observation, understanding, and foresight. This was not the way to defeat a truly strong man. After sending the knights back to their posts, Takumu was left alone with Hiro. He noticed that she was a good sword woman, but that wasn't enough. Her problem was that to her there were only those who win and those who lose. He talked about how she thought it was natural to lose to him. She didn't really have any regrets. She wasn't interested in him. So Hibana thought only of herself and lost. He called it a fatal flaw. Hibana had never had a suitable opponent her age, and the Golden Knights were too far away. She had no idea how to look at an opponent and suddenly attack. To fix that, she should have felt the bitterness of defeat. Believing in your victory was the best way to see your opponent from the other side. Takuma was not only strong, but also guided people to the right path. Hiro was glad they were on the same side. He was grateful to him and believed that she would definitely become stronger after this. Takuma also had a request to make him a sword. Hiro was surprised by his unexpected request. If possible, he asked to use his broken sword as a material. Hiro's sword made with alchemy was able to shatter his sword. It was an important ritual for him. Even though he used it like this, it didn't matter. He wanted to fight with it again if he could. Thanks to this ritual, Takuma was able to accept alchemy and move on. In gratitude for training with Hibana, Hiro agreed to make him a good sword. Ordinary metal had no history. If you put enchantment on it, compatibility would be poor. But Takuma's brother had fought with his sword, so it should definitely have a battle history. The enchantment would undoubtedly go well. He asked him not to use the new sword against Hibana. Takuma was just planning it to see if they could outclass him. He hoped he would. Hiro slowly approached his friend, his gaze staring into the void. When their gazes met, he saw her eyes fill with tears. She knew she had lost defeatedly. She had lost before, but this time was the most frustrating. Hiro decided that they needed to get rid of that grudge then. Hibana kept setting herself up to get stronger and not be so clumsy anymore. Hiro had faith in her. Holding out his hand to her, he offered to go home. At this fight, he realized what she needed, so he would help her win. Hibana saw her difference with him again. No matter how much she trained, she wouldn't catch up to him in 1 week. What she needed right now was Hiro's strength. It was proof that she was looking ahead. She didn't need his reassurance. The prince decided to mind his own business. Together, the two of them would defeat brother Takuma. Today, Hibana was in no mood to win. Just figuring out the difference between them had brought enough results. But Takuma was much farther away than she thought. Even with that disadvantage, she couldn't move her arms or legs. No longer was the girl so sure of herself. Hiro remembered how she herself had said earlier that she wouldn't be like that anymore. She felt ashamed of herself. She believed that she would surely catch up to him. And yet, defeating him in a week would be unrealistic. No matter how many swords Hiro made her, she couldn't even stand up to him. Hiro knew the only way out. Improve everything but the sword. The destructive power of that sword equaled 4. The basis of her sword was lightness and sharpness. You couldn't make it lighter, and sharpness was enough. Her fighting style already had resilience and destructive power. So, there was no point in improving all of that anymore. So Hiro would create an armor that improved reflexes and dynamic vision. All of this would be in the armor. But because of the strain on the body, the limit would only be 3 minutes. That was more than enough time to fight the swordsman. She wondered how he would make such armor. Hiro said that he would use electrical power. Hiro didn't know how to explain electricity to Hibana. It would be faster to demonstrate it on her. She thought it was something indecent. By his hesitation, she was convinced of that. She gave him a free pass. Hiro took her hand. He directed a stream of energy directly into her palm. A sharp but quickly fading wave of current pierced her body, making her muscles shudder. Hibana reacted in an unexpectedly cute way that caused her to laugh. She had learned that humans had nerves and electricity ran along them. The muscles moved thanks to the electricity. Therefore, if one ran electricity on purpose, the muscles would involuntarily contract. The sensation wasn't very pleasant, and Hiro wanted to use such a tool. By controlling the electricity in the brain, dynamic vision could be enhanced and reaction could be improved by speeding up the transmission of signals to the muscles. That was the effect he was going to create armor with. Hibana had made a decision. She wanted to use the electricity in tomorrow's training session, get used to the armor, and thoroughly study Prince Takumu's movements. She was blazing with enthusiasm again. It would take 2 days to create, so Hiro had asked her to wait. Still, she wanted to know why it involved obscenities. He explained that each person's nerves transmit electrical signals differently. We'd have to figure out how much electricity would be needed. So you need to have the electricity going directly to the skin. If clothing gets in the way, the accuracy will be reduced, and they will not be able to collect the correct data. She asked if they could start collecting data after eating and bathing. He became unclear as to the reason. Hibana explained that she needed to get ready to meet her loved one. Hiro hastily replied that after a meal was fine. He continued that he had told her about meeting someone. He promised her to meet someone who bakes bread deliciously. The girl replied that she would be interested in meeting someone he liked. She realized it from his voice. When he talks about him, he looks happier. Hibana still didn't understand anything. He noticed that he liked her. You could even say that he loved her. He saw her as an important link to save the kingdom. Hibana had to stay late. She was in a hurry, so she wore casual clothes. Hiro thought it suited her. He smelled a pleasant odor. The girl, thinking this day was special, had used perfume from the Principality of Kinner, even though to him it was not. Hibana was ready for anything. Hiro didn't even take it into his head. They went to the floor where the royal family lived and were on their way to meet a member of the royal family. The girl was scared, thinking she was going to meet her rival. Hiro led her into a room teeming with books. It used to be his father's study, but she had turned it into her room. She slammed the book shut abruptly. Her eyes sparkled with warmth as the girl greeted them with a soft smile. Hibana, upon seeing her, couldn't contain her surprise. So sweet and lively, she seemed like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. The girl had been waiting for this meeting. Hiro had told her a lot about her. Nayuki, the second princess of Cardarasa, turned out to be his sister. Hibana couldn't understand why he hadn't introduced her to her before. She knew that Nayuki rarely appeared in public, but now she met her for the first time. Hiro explained that it was about Mayali's sister. They purposely didn't show Nayuki to people. Hibana couldn't help but agree with him. Hibana, showing respect, introduced herself as Prince Hiro's knight. Nayuki was excited to meet her brother's childhood friend. Nayuki rarely went outside due to her weak body, so Hiro would tell her about the world around her. Previously, when he came to get a book, he would tell her about it every time. Nayuki was weak, but she was always envious of strong women. And so she always admired Hibana, which couldn't help but touch the girl's heart. She envied having such a sister. Hibana could not refrain from hugging when she saw such a touching creature in front of her. However, it wasn't the princess that her arms encircled. It was the voice she recognized. Rebecca was Nayuki's knight and Hiro and Hibana's friend. The princess felt calm around her. The knight wouldn't allow Nayuki to be hugged by anyone but her. The prince greeted Rebecca. He remembered an occasion when she had helped them so much. She had followed Princess Nayuki's orders that day. Rebecca would never forget the humiliation of being forced to wear servants' clothes. Hibana rejoiced when she realized that she was the one who brought them the food then. That she didn't recognize her she attributed to excitement. Rebecca gave her a friendly clap on the shoulder. She greeted her friend who had returned to be Prince Hiro's knight. She noticed that he was stubbornly refusing other knights. Hibana guessed he was waiting for her because of their promise. Rebecca missed their training sessions with Master Hiss. Hiro grudgingly remembered how she had treated him before. Hibana had thought she would become an army commander, but now she continued to serve someone. She figured that if Rebecca chose to be her mistress, then Princess Nayuki was an amazing person. Rebecca laughed. She said withal that Princess Nayuki was the greatest treasure of this kingdom. She was willing to give even her own life to protect her. She simply idolized her. Rebecca's love for Nayuki was understandable. Hiro decided to explain everything to Hibana. They were his secret allies. To convince the brothers, Nayuki baked bread, and Rebecca delivered it to them disguised as a servant. At this stage, he didn't want a lot of people to know about them, so he asked them to help. Back to the main thing, they called him here because it was ready. Rebecca brought the paste he asked her to make. Hiro assessed its quality. It was the noodle variety. Hibana didn't understand how something that looked like straw could be tasty. Hiro explained that it was a dried canned food that had to be boiled first before it could be eaten. The princess added that it may not have sounded like much, but if you boiled the paste in hot water, it was delicious. The paste could be stored for 3 years. When there was a good harvest, you could make the paste and save it in case of a bad harvest. Hibana tasted a lot of noodles in the Duchy of Kinner, but not as hard. Of canned food, Rebecca had only seen dried bread. She had never thought of dried noodles. Nayuki called them to eat, having prepared more than just dried food. She called everyone to the table. The boys gathered around a small round table. Hibana offered to help, but was politely declined as she was a guest. The princess treated them to her noodles. A thick steam rose, like an invisible plume, promising bliss. The dish looked appetizing, awakening everyone's appetite. Rebecca couldn't help but smirk, noticing how their eyes lit up. Hiro added a little salt. He took the first bite and chewed the food thoroughly. The flavor of this pasta was actually incredible. Nayuki's food was easy and pleasant to eat. The prince admitted that when he cooked the food, it was just awful. He didn't even think it was possible to improve the flavor so much with salt. It had cost Nayuki a lot of practice. Hiro was sure their subjects would love her food. It was great that after so many attempts, it turned out to be such a delicious dish. Before saying compliments, the princess insisted on trying the pasta and sauce first. The first sauce had a white color. It was based on potatoes. They added mashed potatoes and salt to the mushroom soup. Since Hiro had memories from another world, he wasn't surprised by such a sauce based on onion soup puree. But Nayuki was different. She was able to come up with such a sauce while living in a world where food was only boiled. She was a culinary genius. They were going to try another sauce. The skein of noodles with the mysterious sauce slowly floated up to their mouths, and the anticipation was almost unbearable. When Hibana finally took a bite, her tongue immediately felt a sharp stab of acid. The base of this sauce was vinegar. The girl had never heard of vinegar in their kingdom before. The pasta and the sour sauce went very well together. Nayuki admitted that they got the vinegar by accident when they were cooking. It was very convenient on its own, So she decided to take advantage of that accident and created a sauce with vinegar, oil, salt, and dried meat. This meat was also used in soup. Both versions had a deliciously rich flavor and made the kids excited. After praising his sister for her work, Hiro wanted to take her recipes. Being able to show them to everyone was a great happiness for her. Not only would they give the people wheat, but easy pasta recipes with delicious sauces. Nayuki's help was simply invaluable and will be needed in the future. She said she made the vinegar by accident. Hiro asked if what she was trying to make it worked out. The princess replied that it worked out. There was still room for improvement, but it was already tasty enough. He explained to Hibana that he had asked Nayuki for something. He had been trying to make it for a long time. It would be a symbol of their developing country. Rebecca tasted it as well and was delighted by its flavor. She never thought it would be something like this in their country. Hibana wanted to taste it too. Rebecca brought out a jug decorated with ornaments. She slowly poured the thick liquid into massive wooden mugs. Hiro leaned over to his friend and offered to taste it. Then it would make sense. He hadn't drank this in a long time. It became pleasant not only to his tongue, but also to his throat. The bitter taste was disappearing and the sweetness was revealing itself. It was a powerful flavor of wheat and hops. Hiro couldn't help but enthusiastically call it a delicacy. He took a closer look at the mug and couldn't believe it. It was ale, and a very high quality one at that. After he developed a new variety of wheat, all he could think about was creating alcohol. It is not necessary to save the kingdom, but it is necessary to make the life of the people richer and happier. Such a symbol would be the products of the flavor industry. For example, ale. In the Principality of Kinner, Hibana had tasted ale before, but to make it so delicious for the first time. Hiro had learned the recipe from a respondent, and the main thing about it was the quality of the wheat and Nayuki's talent. It was a taste of happiness, a product not for the simple, but for a rich, full life. Hiro turned to his sister seriously. At the harvest festival, he would announce to the people that he would become king, and he wanted this ale to be on him. He asked if she could organize it. The princess replied in agreement. Hiro saw that his sister could always be relied upon. The brothers thought that Nayuki was useless, that she was too trusting, couldn't go into diplomacy, and therefore couldn't marry out of convenience. Other than that, she was smart, but definitely not in politics. Despite having magical and physical abilities, her skin was too susceptible to the sun. Exercise was ruinous to her body, so she couldn't fight. Kindness was also dragging her down. But Nayuki had the power to save their kingdom. That bread the brothers liked was baked by her. Next time, they would tell them everything. They'll definitely change their minds about Nayuki. Takumu and Hibana's training was also very important, but it was also important to make their kingdom prosperous. When he and his brother Agatha united and planted wheat everywhere, they would need Nayuki's recipes. By doing all this, their kingdom would only move forward. When their plates were empty, they finally finished their lunch. Hiro decided that it was now safe to proceed with the measuring. Hibana asked to be given an hour. The food was very good, and she had overeaten, so her belly was getting big. She asked to understand her. Her voice alone could burn calories. To avoid the foul odor of sweat, she had a towel. An hour had almost passed. By now she was ready. She thanked him for waiting. Hibana stood motionless. She didn't dare to look at him. Hiro's face was covered with a blush. He tried to concentrate on his work, to get this awkward moment over with as soon as possible. It was rather embarrassing for the girl to stand like this. His cold hands touched her back, causing her to wince involuntarily. It was her hot skin, he thought. She was more exposed at sea. Hiro felt strange. When she was being so modest, he knew it was rude to her, and tried to rid himself of those thoughts. Electricity ran through her body. She still couldn't get used to the electric shock and was shivering all over. The guy was impressed that she was uniquely developing her whole body. Hiro said she had talent. He could tell just from the electric current alone, which was amazing. If they succeeded now, the difference with Takuma would be minimal. The next part of the job would be up to her. Hibana assured him that she would definitely get stronger within a week. Both realized that even with his weapons, her efforts wouldn't get her as monstrously strong as Takuma, but the two of them could do it. Hibana suddenly realized that it would be a waste if she was the only one using his weapons. He said that he and Takuma planned to supply his army with his weapons in the future. She asked curiously if he would do the same with the men. Hiro sighed and muttered that he would try. She noted the benefit in making everyone weapons, but would he provide everyone with personal weapons as well? If they get bad weapons, then their army would be on par with the Golden Knight Order of the Duchy of Kiner. And if make better weapons, then that would be their goal. Hiro realized that if they didn't win as easily as Brother Takuma without alchemical equipment, it would be bad. Hibana discerned the point. The girl realized that she had complained for nothing before, and promised to make the best of it. He liked her answer. She was especially motivated by Nayuki's pasta. The delicious food gave her a lot of energy. Hiro asked her to stay still. There was still some time left. The prince slumped lazily in his chair, leaning his head back. Hibana asked if he was tired. He replied that in a way he was. Letting her go to her room, he wanted to get the job done to perfection. She admitted that when he saw her naked, she was very anxious and felt strange. There was nothing Hiro could do about it. The next day, a tunnel in the vicinity of the Devil's Forest. They dug without sparing any effort, but the distance was short. It would be even more difficult from here on. At the same time, they had to prepare drainage and ventilation equipment. The guys decided to take a short break for refreshment. The food looked very delicious and exuded a heady aroma. This pasta was prepared by Nayuki. The princess took great care to make sure the snack was convenient and tasty. She loved learning new things. The lunch was made at Hiro's request. That salty flavor was heaven for a tired body. They had only started digging the tunnel yesterday, but Hibana was already tired. They had important things to do in the afternoon. Hiro would have a meeting with Prince Agata, and she would train with Takuma. Starting today, they would start training just the two of them. She thought to show the soldiers how to get stronger. Hiro informed her that he would be busy today, so he wouldn't be able to see their training, but he wanted her to detail how she felt after the training. Her costume was already ready. Previously, Hiro had said it would take 2 days, because she said she would get used to it in a day, and she also wanted to see Takuma's movements clearly. Hibana took in the look on his face and noticed the black circles under his eyes. Hiro claimed he was asleep, though his sleep was 5 minutes. His eyes read a lie, and she could see it. The girl was very glad that he had done all this for her. Both realized that they couldn't leave the tunnel at this stage, or it would fall apart. If they didn't work hard today, they wouldn't finish in time. They could only dig with magic, and the amount of mana recovery time was the same. Hiro reasoned that nothing should fall apart in 2 days. Hibana looked at him in amazement and asked if it was really that strong. He smiled and replied that compared to her, no. The sooner he finished, the sooner Hibana would get stronger. He didn't see anything wrong with not sleeping for 1 night. The girl had promised to carry him carefully. Hiro hoped that she would be sure to tell him all of her sensations. She was still inexperienced and had a lot of weaknesses. He was going to do more things. When she tested this suit, they would identify its weaknesses, Hiro would improve it, and she would become many times stronger. Such was their life. Hibana decided she wasn't going to hold back. He would look forward to it. The meeting between Hiro and Agatha came. Agatha, wasting no time, asked to be shown the materials. Hiro informed that they would be using the fields this year. In order for their people to grow wheat, Agatha realized that they needed to show them the results first. After all, it was risky not for the people, but for them. At the moment, they had two kinds of fields, private fields and public fields. The cultivation of the public fields was handled by knights of laborers. Such knights were not professionals, and their training took a couple hours. The rest of the time, they were either tilling the fields or farming. Soldiers were usually second or third sons, or very rarely, people from another country. They added to the total harvest of the kingdom and received a salary in return, and retired when they became elderly. Thanks to his brother's development plan, the crops were always plentiful, even paying wages. He stayed in the plus side. Landless people could get money for proper food and dreamed of getting their own field in the future. This system was invented by Agatha. Both the people and the kingdom were in a favorable situation. The internal politics were very good. No matter how much they said that wheat wouldn't sprout in the fields, unless there was a precedent, no one would be convinced. Besides, they tried to grow wheat several times before and never succeeded. If they started talking about growing wheat again, the people would get scared and wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So the first thing to do was to show them a successful result. Both realized that it wasn't enough to just try, because a bad harvest year would lead to an immediate general famine. But if one utilized the government fields and the knights of the laborers, it would be a different conversation altogether. Even in the unlikely event of failure, they would simply be able to pay the knights, and they wouldn't starve to death. And thanks to Hiro making salt, it could be used at the right hour. It seemed to Hiro as if he didn't believe the wheat could grow, and was thinking of backup ways out. Agatha noted that she believed in his strength, which was a little different. Preparing for anything was his job. Hiro offered to continue, since he had no objections to the plan. But Agatha reported one problem. The soldiers wouldn't agree to it. They were coming to ask that they plant yams according to the plan. The people did not want to regret not planting yams. Agata said they would be paid their wages even if nothing grew, but those people would not listen to him. They helped each other to survive in this unfavorable world. Their love for the country and their friends was very strong. They did not think of money in case of failure, but that if they did not plant yams, someone would starve. It was very noble and made them proud, but it would be bad if they limited themselves to yams this year. The first thing to do was to grow wheat in the government field, showing good results and providing everyone with grain left over for next year. Next year the plan would be to grow wheat throughout the kingdom, and if they failed this year, they would be a whole year late. The only drawback was the difference in yield. The amount of improved wheat was much higher than yams. In the present situation, it was very dangerous to rely on yam alone. If they continued to grow yams on the same land, their yield would drop as the land gradually became infertile. Much scarier was the contamination of the yam. If it got sick, it would definitely lead to a general famine. And there was no guarantee that wouldn't happen. Hiro wanted them to have at least two staple foods. Wheat, one of the pillars of saving this kingdom. Losing 1 year would be very unpleasant for the kingdom's economy. Agatha pointed out that they could just order the knights to work, but that would be wrong. This kingdom was only created because the people love it, and if the foundation is broken, the accumulated discontent will instantly burst out. But if you force the wheat to be planted and it sprouted, there was still some way to convince the people. But that was quite risky. The people living here were the kingdom's only assets, and there was no way to lose them. It took 3 months to harvest Hiro's wheat. This variety was resistant to the cold, but it wouldn't survive when full-blown winter came. Given the season, it had to be planted within 3 weeks before it was too late. But he wanted everyone to work, believing they could enrich their kingdom. Hiro turned to his brother with determination. He wanted to try to convince them. 5 years ago, Hiro wanted to be like the adults, so he did jobs in the forest clearing that were beyond his age. He dreamed of waking up in a clear field with seeds. He was hungry, so he wanted to get some money. One of the villagers held out food to him. He treated the hero prince with potatoes from his mother. The men knew no fatigue and burned with enthusiasm, ready to labor to the last. They quickly took up their positions, leaving him alone to rest. The brothers watched in silence as work simmered below. The work ended early today. Agatha suggested he find out more about it. Hiro didn't want to disturb them. Agatha could have called them to the castle without wanting to go to the outpost. He felt it necessary to show his sincerity. Agatha's story was excellent. But something was strange. He didn't convince them, and Hiro was lost in conjecture. He knew he had to try harder. The men finally finished their work on the field, exhausted but satisfied. Their eyes shone when they saw the hero prince. One of them had already asked him not to come alone anymore, and he understood that perfectly well. He hinted that there were certain rumors that were worth discussing. The laborers were in need of new tools. The times when they could get by without them were over. Hiro saw that they were more practical than the old ones. Most of the iron mined was needed to make armor. Unfortunately, there was no mine. If you didn't use the hilt you picked up, you'd be limited to just using the tip of the blade. Also, this guy was thinking about when they could drop off the yam. Hiro doubted he needed the adventure, so it would be easier to start growing wheat. He declared his firm decision to grow wheat. Other options were ruled out. The workers met his decision with bewilderment and indignation. They were disappointed in their hero prince. Hiro wanted them to consider growing green onions and wheat. He suggested they'd better look at the wheat he brought. Maybe with the special fertilizer it would sprout this time. Wheat was much more reliable than yams. With it there was a very low probability of failure. If all went according to plan, it would bear fruit by winter. The men were still hesitating, and their doubts were growing. The fellow laboring in the field spoke out strongly. The wheat was small, there would be nothing to eat, and they would feed like mosquitoes. The prince's words were perceived to be untrue. Famine might follow. Winter might come very early this year. If he didn't do strange things, they could survive it safely this year. Hiro, meeting the people's disbelief, tensed up. Even though Saima is not a bad guy, the prince was not in agreement that growing yams was the only sure way out. He may be a fool, but unlike others, he could be convinced otherwise. He's one of the only people Hiro could trust. Talking to anyone but him could lead to unpleasant consequences. Hiro could answer his question. He explained why he wanted to grow wheat. To enrich the country. In any case, yams were not to be used. The yield of this wheat is higher than that of yam. Besides, it was useless as it was now. The country could have fallen into disrepair. Hiro was terribly afraid of that. Bowing his head, he asked to be trusted. No one had expected such an action from the prince. He realized that his request was not what they needed right now. He was negotiating now, even though he didn't want to do it. His desire to do something and help meant only one thing. He considered them like-minded. He didn't want to cheat his feelings. After all, they were his friends. Saima stubbornly stated that it was time for him to grow up, and he didn't want to hear about wheat anymore. His father and grandfather had grown wheat too, until they realized it was a lost cause. Hiro promised that such failures would not happen again. Saima had no choice but to follow the hero prince. He, agreeing to Hiro's suggestion, asked him to raise his head. The one, touched by the support, thanked him. Saima admitted that he would have found it disgusting once. But the other men persisted. They were not going to listen to a prince who knew nothing about agriculture. They argued that the royal family didn't starve, that's why they said so. The workers were willing to fight to the last to protect what they thought was their only chance of survival. Hiro felt that there was no way to change their minds that way. If it didn't work out, he wouldn't have a chance to move on. Saima took on this daunting task. He shouted in such a way that everyone's mouths dropped open in anticipation. The boy was perplexed at how he could sling mud at the prince with such confidence. He recalled how the prince had shared his knowledge with them when there was a crop failure. Thanks to him, they had been able to turn things around at that time. It meant that the prince was always striving to make their lives better. Hiro's gaze became thoughtful, and a shadow of regret flashed across his face. He didn't have as much strength as Takuma, didn't have as much intelligence as Agatha. He had nothing that this country could use. Saima had tried to convey to them that he didn't have to tear through these hard times with them at all, but they had shed sweat together. Gritting their teeth, they wanted to make this country a better place. And when the prince heard their complaints and suggested a way to make things just a little bit better, they put their heads down. Saima also mentioned the iron hose they had. Hiro felt helpless. He was just wasting time trying to do anything. He was just trying to forget that he was helpless. Saima couldn't forget those moments when the prince came to the aid of their people. Hiro thought of it as nothing but complacency, because it was all he could do. Saima believed him because he was the prince's hero. Together they would overcome any hardship. He would follow him if he said everything was fine and wheat was better than potatoes. Saima was sure that they could only trust him. After the inspirational speech, everyone fell silent. Hiro knew he should break the silence, but he couldn't find the words. From the excess of feelings, he couldn't control himself. This was the first time he had ever felt this way. At that moment, the men began to look over at each other, feeling awkward. They apologized to him. The workers understood him, but wheat was still no guarantee. The horrors of the famine were still vivid in their minds as they lost loved ones. They were afraid and thought it was too unreliable. Forgetting the good the prince had done as a hero, they rebuked him. They hadn't thought of that at all. Hiro smiled warmly as people shared their worries openly without hiding their emotions. He understood what they feared, but there was no way he would let them down. The eyes of the workers were burning with determination. They unanimously decided to grow wheat. Hiro brought a large, carefully wrapped box. Inside was fresh bread from the harvested potatoes. If they planted wheat, they would have plenty of bread. If one can discern their true feelings despite all the troubles, all was well. Hiro would not betray their expectations and faith. Previously, he had thought of double and triple precautions to avoid worrying. This time he would try even harder. When they arrived at the castle, Agatha praised him for his work. Hiro was sure his brother would have been able to convince them on his own. Agatha curiously asked where that confidence came from. He'd only been able to convince them with eloquence, though he'd rather be taught a lesson. Agatha explained that in the first place, if the case was used correctly, the loyalty of Saima, who was significant among the inhabitants, would only grow. If so, the rest of the residents would also become fiercely supportive of Hiro, and he would become king. Politics included such a thing. Secondly, he was about to announce something incredibly important. Agatha wanted to tell him that there was something about him that he was afraid of. It sounded unexpected, and he was openly admitting it. Hiro said he was happy with what he was doing. He had been helping all kinds of people for a long time. When viewed from the scale of the entire country, these are insignificant things. However, if you put it all together, it becomes a huge force. The trust of the people. The people believed in what he told them, would follow him. Trust cannot be gained overnight. It is an immutable treasure, and also the strongest weapon. If Hiro becomes king, he should remember well that the complacency he spoke of has turned into confidence. If he has it, this country can change. Everything he has done up to this point has not been in vain. Hiro must have wanted someone to say that to him all this time. Agatha did all of this so that before he became king, he would realize what kind of weapons he possessed. Alchemy is nothing more than a tool. So to change the country, he must think bigger. What scared him was the trust that Hiro could gain. He must not forget that. If he forgets, Agatha will not forgive him and will have this country. Hiro froze, keeping his eyes on the receding figure. Agatha's brother had noticed him. Hiro owed him a debt of gratitude. These two wanted to be themselves, unashamed of anything. To be worthy of gaining the trust of these men, he too would remain himself. He believed that he could surely change this country if he loved it. The next day came when the laborers with heavy tools in their hands went to the field again. From that day on, they started planting wheat in all the fields. Hiro stood at the head of the wheat sowing to make sure the machinery was correct and the soil was fertilized effectively. This year he led the process, but from next year he will train people from the village to replace him. Explaining everything once is not enough, so he distributed instructions. The day in the field had come to an end. The workers were pleased with their success and had a desire to move on. When the prince informed them that sometimes cold weather spoils the wheat, but that it can grow safely in low temperatures, they were convinced that he understood everything. Hiro's life was now filled with turmoil. However, there was a sense of finality to it. Bit by bit, the tunnel continued to be built. The wheat plantings were increasing. Before winter came, the red ears would surely appear in the fields. People looked forward to enjoying the abundance of wheat. When the wheat sprouted, the whole country would be filled with smiles. Hiro couldn't wait for that day. Hiro was working in his office when it was time for dinner. Suddenly, Hibana walked into the room. She looked like she had just run a marathon. The girl took a few steps, but her legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. Hibana's body was covered in fresh impact marks. But this time she managed to hit Takuma. Hiro used an ointment that would make her feel better immediately. Finished with her back, he left the front part to her. It was said that you could only do such a thing after marriage. This was an unexpected statement from a member of the royal family. She had been looking forward to this moment. However, thanks to Hibana snagging him, they might have a chance of winning. She might have hit him during the acceleration. The power of her equipment was put into that hit. Hiro asked with a slight smile if she had picked up on anything else interesting. She called his coordination perfect. When Hibana first fought the prince, she couldn't move her limbs. But today, on the third day of training, she was finally able to land a single blow. If this continued, she would be able to win in the 3 remaining days. That sounded promising, and Hiro was looking forward to her victory. She had said that there were 8 people among the Golden Knights who were incapable of defeating her, and he wondered about the other 4. Their strength was almost equal, Hibana thought. The knights matched the number of sacred swords, but 8 of them were outstanding. If he had a sword, she was sure he would have been able to win as well. That meant there were ranks among the Golden Knights as well. Hiro asked how she would rate Takuma compared to the knights. In the girl's opinion, even if the opponents had holy swords, he would have defeated 5 of them. But he wouldn't be able to defeat the remaining 3. Those called the 3 holy swords were special. Hiro assumed that if his brother had a magic sword made by him, he would be able to defeat the 3 holy swords. Hibana's opinion on the matter was uncertain. Until today, Hiro knew his brother was strong, but he didn't realize that that was true on a world scale. But he was well aware of his powerful strength, comparable to that of the Golden Knights. If they could include Takuma in their plan, the chances of success would increase. The main problem of this country was the neighboring countries. When they found out about their country's wealth, invasions would begin. At such a time, the best way to solve the problem was to not use force. However, the number of people who were in favor of victory at any cost far exceeded those who didn't need war. They could only fight as a last resort, because there were also peaceful measures. It was better to have a trump card up their sleeve. If they had Takuma, who could match the 3 sacred swords in strength, and Hibana, who would surpass him, already potentially 2 in this country could become as powerful as the 3 sacred swords. Maybe they can defeat the Golden Knight Order. Hibana reasoned that it was arrogant to think right now that the 2 of them could defeat the Golden Knights. They needed one more person. And she felt that person should be Hiro. The boy was sure that even if he had a first-class sword, he wouldn't be the best. Hibana understood that. However, she believed that he would be on par with them because of his fighting style. That would be enough. Hiro didn't consider it a necessity. Besides, trying to learn the combat power of the alchemical silver would be a good idea. Hibana didn't hesitate to change clothes in his room, since she knew they would be living together in the future. If there were no issues with the outfit, he wasted no time in asking if anything was wrong. The girl had a request. She wanted him to name her sword. The girl considered it an important gift from the man she trusted with her life. Calling it a magic sword didn't seem quite fair. Hiro had made it especially for her, but she wanted him to name it himself. She reasoned that it was sentimental. He didn't understand any of it, but if it made her happy, he'd be sure to come up with one. Suddenly his eyes flashed. The idea came of itself. The girl froze, holding the sword in her hand, and her face lit up with joy, as if the light itself had descended upon her. Hiro decided to name this sword Hanabi. The glittering fire flowers blooming in the sky were truly beautiful. She also glittered when using the sword, so he found the name appropriate. Hibana held her breath and looked at the sword enchanted. It made her want to look at the fiery flowers blooming in the sky. Hiro noticed that it wasn't that impossible. He decided that when she defeated Takuma in a duel, they would celebrate and set off fireworks that evening. And if she lost, there would be nothing, and they would do some work on their mistakes. Hibana knew she wouldn't lose. Fighting without knowing the meaning of the sword's name was too sad. The duel was 3 days away. It was foolish to design such a complicated fireworks display right now. But even so, Hiro could handle it. He wanted to see Hibana admiring him. Because looking at the fireworks, she was much more beautiful than the fireworks themselves. The girl continued to train hard, not knowing rest. So imperceptibly, these quiet days flew by. The day of the duel came. Prince Hiro and his knight arrived at the arena. Behind, accompanied by Rebecca, walked Princess Nayuki, whom many people were seeing for the first time. Rebecca flashed a sharp, warning glance at the men, keeping her eyes on the girl. Hiro stepped into the center of the arena, where the honored spectators had already gathered. Opposite stood Takumu, a cold determination in his eyes. Hiro remembered the day when Hibana and Takumu had fought for the first time. But today, they had an equal chance of winning. Takumu and Hiro's duel would be witnessed by Agatha. He announced that his knight Hibana would be fighting in this fight instead of Hiro. This is a serious battle with real swords. The condition of victory was to strike a single blow with a sword. The loser gives up the right to succeed to the throne. Agatha, the second prince of the kingdom, had already renounced it. Thus, the winner would automatically become the next king. There were no objections. Takumu entrusted his fate to his sword. Hiro, on the other hand, entrusted his fate to the sword of his knight. When the preparations were complete, he asked his brother if he was ready. Takumu still had something to say. He asked Knight Hiro to be victorious in this fight. The knight's faces turned pale with amazement. Takumu explained that he wasn't giving up. He wanted Hiro to justify his beliefs with a fight. If he couldn't surpass him, his views would become insignificant. In that case, it would be better for them to disappear, for his sake and the good of the country. Then Takumu will become king. But if Hiro surpasses him, he will recognize his beliefs as true and provide him with subordinates he forged himself. Takumu declared that he would fight at full strength. Therefore, when he is surpassed, he will recognize Hiro. The warriors threw their fists upward with delight. All these people who followed Takumu wanted to see his strength. They trusted him and were excited to see him fight at full strength. Therefore, Hiro was eager to see the power that would surpass him. He had heard everything his brother had said. Now all that was left was to win. When Hiro gently touched Hibana's shoulder, she flinched as if she'd been electrocuted. She had been afraid, but all her fear was gone thanks to the fright. Everything was back to normal now. She was pretending to be strong. However, thanks to that pretense, she felt confident in herself. Hibana had really grown up. Hiro had told her to go and win. Takumu had already gotten into a fighting stance. He hoped that she would show her superiority in this fight. Her eyes widened in surprise. She couldn't stand up to him alone. She had grown stronger, but she was still no match for him. But the girl believed that she and Hiro could win. Every second brought the fight closer, and the tension in the air was becoming almost palpable. Agatha shouted out the start of the duel. At that moment, Hibana flashed like lightning and rushed forward as if her body was powered by the very energy of space. Hiro realized that she was using the acceleration function. This function stimulated the brain and the body's internal current, as well as increasing the acuity of dynamic vision and reflexes. She would attack first when Takumu was fully exposed. If she didn't succeed now, she would be killed. The girl stepped up close to her enemy, knowing it was risky. Previously, Hibana could only snag Takumu, but now, she could see every move he made. Nayuki held her breath, watching Hibana's every move. Rebecca noticed that even though Takumu stepped back, he continued to dodge. Hibana was catching up to him from all sides, her movements swift and unpredictable. Takumu dodged, his reactions lightning fast, but every time he thought he had dodged a blow, her blade came dangerously close. And so, he performed a special move that pushed her away. It was a sword lunge, so fast and powerful that Hibana barely had time to react. The girl wasn't about to give up. She stopped him with the hilt. Takumu felt that this was where it should end. She took advantage of this vulnerability. She instantly moved into a blind spot. There would be no way to see the attack from there. Hibana's sword flashed through the air like lightning. It seemed like the moment that would decide everything had arrived. But suddenly, Takumu disappeared from her sight. She had gotten too caught up in her attack and let her guard down, even though she was out of sight. Based on her stance, he predicted the trajectory. Every time it looked like one of them would win, the other would find a way to evade or counterattack. Neither of them was going to give up, which meant the fight was on. The excitement in the arena peaked. Hibana swung her sword with fury, and her blade sliced Takumu's sword in half. The fragment flew past his ear. The audience gasped in unison. Takumu slowly closed his eyes. A slight smile flashed across his face, but the next moment he collapsed to the ground. Hibana froze, her gaze flicking to her defeated opponent. She had been declared the winner. Hiro, without wasting a second, rushed over to his brother. He pulled out a small vial and, without hesitation, poured out all the liquid. The liquid sizzled, and after a few moments, the edges of the wound began to heal. Hiro was worried about his well-being. Gritting his teeth, Takuma let out a faint groan. He felt the magic flowing into his body, healing him from the inside out. The wounds on the surface of his skin had healed, but now required rest for the next 3 days to keep the wounds from opening. Takuma noticed that Hibana's sword and armor had worn out in this battle, but they had proven to be very reliable. He raised himself up to announce his loss. Imagining what would happen if a magical sword clashed with an ordinary sword, he tried to avoid hitting it in the fight. But Hibana's counterattack exceeded his expectations. The moment he reflected her strike, the outcome of the battle was already a foregone conclusion. They all saw it. He thought he didn't look like a fool who made it easy for his opponent to win. Thanks to the sword and equipment made by Hiro, Hibana was able to equalize his strength in the fight. Believing in that power allowed them to trust Hiro with the power. Takuma hoped he would make them stronger with his power. For his sake, they would use it for good. Hiro had made a promise. A promise to Takumu and his fighters that he would use these powers to revitalize the country. So he asked to use his knowledge to become stronger. The delighted looks of the knights were full of trust and hope. They believed that a bright future awaited their country with the new king. Takumu offered to congratulate Hiro on becoming the next king. Albeit without a reward, they could just rejoice a little. Hiro took a step towards Hibana. Leaning towards her, he thanked her sincerely. Hibana couldn't believe she was still alive. She had already thought she was going to die. She was lucky that she had been able to prevent that blow. Hiro explained that it wasn't about luck. She had gotten stronger, as expected of his knight. The girl was pleased to hear that. They exchanged warm smiles. After the intense fight, they gathered in a cozy corner to celebrate the victory and enjoy a meal. Even though it was a long-awaited event, they had to settle for potatoes, which were also tasteless. This should have been dealt with before growing potatoes, but both wheat and potatoes were needed. Suddenly, a visit from Princess Nayuki defused the situation. She and Rebecca congratulated the boys on their victory. Even though Hibana had won, she didn't feel any joy. If she had a regular sword, she would have definitely lost. She decided that next time, under the same conditions, they would definitely win. The potatoes were over so quickly that no one even had time to enjoy them. But Princess Nayuki didn't come empty-handed. In fact, half of the potatoes went into preparations for Hiro's victory celebration. She hoped they would enjoy it. Hiro froze, unable to believe his eyes. In front of him, golden croquettes rose on a plate, exuding a tantalizing aroma. It was the dish that Hiro had told her about earlier. The smell attracted the two princes as well, who, as if mesmerized, came closer. Everyone savored every bite, unable to tear themselves away from the dish. Takuma guessed that these delicious croquettes were prepared by Nayuki. The princess glowed like the morning sun when her brother praised her sincerely. In response to the praise, she told him that when the hostesses salted the goat meat, there was extra fat left over from it, which she took and used, adding a little salt. She mashed the potatoes with the meat, salt, and milk thoroughly, making them soft and crumbly. Then she took flour and eggs, dried bread, and got breadcrumbs. Nayuki managed to make such a delicious dish using only second-rate ingredients. If you tell the people about it, they will be overjoyed. She used an iron pot and lots of oil for frying. There weren't particularly many iron pots in town, and to get enough fat, she had to crush a lot of goat meat. Nayuki recognized that even without frying it was a good way to do it. Rebecca remarked that it was unacceptable even for a king to make her sad. Hiro explained that making oil from plants was fairly simple, but the situation with iron was a bit more complicated. There were no mines in this country, so there was a categorical lack of iron. However, it would definitely be enriched from now on. Even to prepare for war, a lot of iron would be needed. The simple way to obtain it was to import it from neighboring countries. But if they met resistance when procuring large amounts of iron, they risked falling under the hot hand of other countries who would consider them hostile because of such purchases. In the event of a war breaking out, Hiro would first of all want to secretly procure a lot of iron. Nayuki tried to calm him down. He explained that it wasn't because of the dish. He was only thinking a bit about the need for iron. Hiro promised that they would definitely get it in the near future. And then, there would finally be iron pots and knives in people's homes. Agatha thought he was thinking something unreasonable. Hiro had become king today, so he asked not to upset him and Takumu. They clinked mugs, and he made a solemn promise. Agatha admitted that Nayuki had surprised them by preparing a complicated dish. Not only did she have a fair amount of knowledge, she wasn't lacking in the right level of expressiveness either. Hiro saw how she tried her best to help them, and thought about entrusting her with the political matters of the country. Agatha was adamantly against it. Hiro understood him, and didn't want to bring her into the public eye either. For her own sake, he didn't want to use his sister. But was it right to let her do nothing but cooking? The princess ran up to her brothers. She was tired, so she wanted to go back to her place. There was a mug lying behind her, which she accidentally stepped on. Losing her balance, she flew down. At the same second, she was picked up by 2 pairs of hands. Her brothers reacted so quickly that she didn't even have time to be frightened. Rebecca ran up to her, concerned, but saw that Nayuki was fine. A strange feeling visited the brothers. They had been at odds before. The time they had spent was enjoyable. Hiro noticed that even though Nayuki had been their medium of communication before, they almost never got together like this. The girl stated that the reason was because of their poor relationship. She tried to get along with both of them all the time, and they could be the same. Hiro apologized for the fact that she constantly had to be the bridge between them. Agatha was going back to the castle to finish her work. Hiro asked them to wait a bit to see something interesting. The prince addressed everyone present. He had prepared something in honor of Hibana and Takumu's battle today. He turned their attention towards the flag. Hiro turned back to his mechanism, ready for action. Several charges soared into the sky. They turned it into a canvas painted with bright colors. Rays of fireworks diverged from several points, creating bizarre patterns that dissolved into the vast blue. The inhabitants of the kingdom froze, holding their breath and watching this breathtaking spectacle. The fiery flowers blooming in the sky that Hibana spoke of were fireworks. Hibana's heart overflowed with admiration. The people rejoiced not only at the beauty of the fireworks, but also at the genius of the prince. None of them had ever seen such a beautiful sight before. The evening continued, growing brighter and more cheerful. Hiro could feel the pleasant atmosphere. If people didn't like the fireworks, it would have been a waste of time. But that didn't matter now, because people were happy. Hibana recognized that this firework was incredibly beautiful, and she would never forget it. It was quite difficult to make, so Hiro was glad that everyone enjoyed it. She realized that her sword was named after something so beautiful. He added that the mistress of this sword was as beautiful as the firework itself. The girl was overjoyed. However, she didn't think she was worthy of that name yet, and so she would keep trying so that one day he would show her even more beautiful fireworks. Hiro would be waiting for that. He said that if he got the wheat, he would have a harvest festival where he was going to announce his coronation. For the first time since this land had existed, there would be a feast so organized that there would hardly be bread, ale, and seafood on the tables. The festivities are sure to go down a treat, and there will be plenty of fireworks. Such a celebration was sure to please everyone. Hiro was going to make it a reality. By the time the feast was over, they would have a lot of millet. By tunneling to the sea, they would have access to salt and could finally get seafood. They will be much richer. When winter comes, food will be plentiful, and they will be able to use the rest. That was exactly the future that Hiro wanted to give them. After all, he believed that simply existing was not enough. Happiness was not a dream. That was what he wanted to convey to the people at the Harvest Festival. He had found a common goal for them, and he would pursue it no matter what. Only through hard work could he make people happy. After that evening, overflowing with laughter and warmth, Hiro and Hibana would return to the castle. She still felt slightly dizzy from the fireworks that remained in her heart. It was astonishing that Hiro had only managed to achieve this through alchemy. The shape was controlled by a large circle that already contained small powder balls, and by setting special metals on fire, they could extract the fiery color. This was called a color reaction. Hiro had done his best with the fireworks, but he was going to be even better prepared for the Harvest Festival. It was possible to survive the winter, but the Harvest Festival hadn't been held in 20 years due to the lack of food. The girl promised to do her best to enjoy his fireworks again. He inquired if she remained satiated. Hibana admitted that she was always hungry and remembered the princess croquettes. Hiro suggested dessert. Her eyes lit up with anticipation. He brought her to the experimental farm. There was more than just wheat here. Hiro was going to show her something special. The plant needed a more comfortable environment, so it was grown indoors. The fruits were impressive in size. They were called melons. The homeland of melons was the Far East. Here they were quite hard to get, so they were very expensive. Thankfully, Hiro had managed to get their seeds in a unique way. That sounded suspicious. Hibana knew from the aroma of the melons, sweet and rich, that they weren't cheap. They had no choice. Sweets were not something that could be enjoyed regularly in their country. Hiro gave her complete freedom of choice, and she decided to try the largest melon. And then she discovered that there was no land in this field, but the fruit was growing. He explained that it was called hydroponics. Most of the growing was done with water and fertilizer. In agriculture, anything could only be grown because of fertile soil, so she was under the impression that there were no other ways. The fact that they couldn't be seen from the outside he called precautions. Hydroponic equipment was too complicated to produce, so people could tell that he did it through alchemy. Though he wouldn't say there was that much equipment, she noticed that he would sometimes withdraw into himself. Before the cultivation, Hiro had been thinking that it was a good way to attract foreign capital. It would be great to use them as a gift for some significant dates. Hibana, choosing the sweetest looking one, decided not to tell anyone that she could taste such deliciousness thanks to Hiro. She offered to eat the melon together, but he doubted there would be enough for two. Nevertheless, he decided to give it a try. The girl's eyes shone with happiness. After peeling the fruit from the seeds, they cut it into several pieces. Now it was safe to eat. When cut, that sweet flavor was even stronger. Hiro told her to take a piece in her hands and bite boldly. She took the first bite of the melon and let out a soft moan of pleasure as she closed her eyes. Hibana felt the cool juice refresh her lips and fill her mouth with sweet flavor. The melon was so soft and melted in her mouth. Hiro had forgotten to warn her about not eating the rind. There were still many pieces of melon left. In an instant, the remains of the fruit were scattered all over the board. Hibana realized that this was truly a heavenly fruit. Like now, she had never been so glad she had followed Hiro. She wanted others to try it as well. However, he would be uneasy if people found out about them. Hiro offered to use it as a reward. He would give one melon to whoever excelled in either war or cultivating the land, incentivizing them. Hibana was willing to do a lot for a melon, so it was best not to joke around like that. But it did taste really good to her. This kind of thing was the first time she had tasted it in her life. Today, she saw the most beautiful thing in a person's life, and she also tasted something most delicious. Hiro thought that sometimes something like this couldn't hurt. He would give it to her as a reward. Suddenly, on a wave of delight, a pleasant odor overtook her. It was coming from the side of the wooden structure, and it didn't taste like melon. Hiro recognized that there was actually something special in there. Now was as good a time as any to open them up. The girl's assumptions came down to alcohol, and she turned out to be right. Hiro had created a melon-infused cellar. Having grown a large amount of melon, he couldn't eat it all by himself, and even what was left couldn't be entirely wasted on fertilizer. So he decided to try making melon tincture. As delicious as it was, he couldn't show it to the people right now. Hibana really liked the melon, so it was a pity that he originally wanted to throw it away. The tincture could be stored in the cellar every year. When Hiro had no doubts about its taste, he could finally present it to the people. She would wait for that day to come. Of course, they couldn't do without a tasting. Hiro had given her permission not to drink it if she didn't like it. This tincture he was adjusting to his taste. The girl tasted a wonderful concentrated flavor. To make the tincture, the melon had to be crushed and left to ferment for a while. Hibana was drinking sweet alcohol for the first time in her life and was ready to drink as much of it as she wanted. Creating sweet alcohol was problematic in itself, as all the sweetness was reduced in the process of turning sugar into alcohol. However, if the melon had a high concentration of sugar, yeast fermentation could be stopped so that the alcohol would remain sweet. Hibana couldn't tear herself away from that sweet melon infusion. She wanted to drink another mug of it. Hiro happily said she could drink it if she liked. That's exactly what he had said then, not giving much thought to his words. The guy thought his feelings for her had already gotten stronger than his feelings for his sister. Lately, he was becoming too talkative. He was afraid that if he fell in love with someone else, the memory of his own sister would disappear inside him. He knew he shouldn't say that. What had he done to help her in any way? He had finally given up trying. When the ground slipped from under his feet, he stopped believing in himself. Apparently, he'd already betrayed the faith of the people who'd entrusted him with her. Perhaps the two of them should have run away together and finally sorted out their own feelings. Hiro considered himself weak. He felt disgusted by it. It seemed to him that Hibana was disappointed in him. But instead of rebukes or cold looks, she hugged him. It wasn't as he thought it would be. Hiro had let her see his weaknesses that he hadn't talked about before. It wasn't fair, after all. He had apologized. She hated him, so now he was cool with it. Hiro realized how selfish he was. Thanks to her, he realized what he should do. He had a duty to revive this country and bring back Princess Mayali. After everything, she hoped he would give her her chance as well. As long as she was with him, he felt that any obstacle was within his reach. She offered to forget everything that had happened today. The girl was already drunk. Everything he'd heard before was just drunken ramblings. As proof of that, she passed out. Hibana collapsed and fell asleep right in his lap. Hiro didn't think he could forget. How could you be able to forget what your favorite girl told you? Hiro hefted her onto his back and carried her to her room. He wouldn't forget about today, but he would pretend to forget. He promised that when he got his sister back, he would seriously consider their relationship. 2 months had passed since Hibana's victory. Things were moving very quickly on the eve of winter. Measures to enrich the country and build up the army were gaining momentum. Hiro came to visit a man. He was worried about his father's well-being. He informed him of his plans to make another version of a new medicine. While he slept, their country was changing. Not long ago, they had dug a tunnel that led to the sea. The new tunnel shone clean and fresh. When you see the splendor, it's breathtaking. One could even use a magic lamp in the Devil's Forest. By working hard on it, they had done something truly extraordinary. They credited it to the prince. They asked him if there was an ocean beyond this cave. Hiro told him that this ocean, unlike the lake, had many more fish. When the expedition team returned from the sea, there was a big commotion. They had brought back so many fish and shellfish. But they needed even more, so Hiro took a cart. Agatha wondered how they would travel without horses. Hiro pointed to Takuma and Hibana, who were much faster than the horses. The cart touched off at an incredible speed. It became a great chance for those two to practice. Agatha was amazed by them. Hiro wasn't sure if they could stop them. Agatha recognized that they were great after all. It took them longer to drag the cart from the castle. The wagon did not shake at all, and the wheels did not make a sound. There was no loss of power. The road in the tunnel was perfect, especially with the tires on. Hiro explained that they were wheel covers to increase driving efficiency. He guessed that the combination of the wagon, the power of the two of them, and the road would allow them to move at about 50 kilometers per hour. Agatha agreed that it would be nice to have such carriages. Hiro was designing another one for him. Agatha would appreciate it. The two continued to drive the cart with a frantic yell. In this, they found an opportunity to have a duel. Hibana decided she had to win, so she wouldn't lose face. Takuma respected her perseverance. They emerged from the gloomy tunnel into bright sunlight. The sea spread out ahead, its surface sparkling like millions of tiny diamonds. The joyful shouts of people merged with the sound of the sea. Hiro suggested fishing. The men picked up their fishing rods with enthusiasm. Each anticipated returning home with a rich catch and the joy in the eyes of their families. As Hiro and Hibana watched them, they saw their faces light up with smiles. Thanks to the tunnel, they had managed to connect the main part of the country to the sea. It was time to proceed to the next step. The sea was not the ultimate goal. It was only the beginning. There were many great goals ahead. Hiro remembered that he had to tell about the wheat as well. The work in the field was in full swing. Finally, there was wheat in Cardarasa. It was harvest time. Hiro managed to gather a lot of people. They had already harvested all the potatoes, and this time the long-awaited wheat. Everyone was happy about it, but he seemed to be the happiest. He had created a human-powered combine harvester. The combine was like a wheelbarrow with a blade sticking out of the edge. People would power it, and it would help harvest the crops. Hiro was just glad they had wheat now. He also built a thresher and a water wheel. But he probably overdid it, and Agatha wouldn't like it. Agata was afraid that other countries would take notice of his inventions. Takuma stood up for him, noting that thanks to him, they finally had a good harvest. And so, this year, they'll have enough food for everyone. Thanks to his innovative work with fertilizer, the potato crop had increased. And because they caught a lot of fish, they consumed less potatoes. Thanks to salt, they were able to pickle their food. And now they had a lot more wheat growing. Such an issue as cutting back on provisions was a thing of the distant past. When they distribute the food to the people, there will be plenty left over. They use it for two purposes. The first is a stockpile in case of war. Neighboring countries would attack in the spring. More food supplies were needed. They were buying salt from their neighbors. It couldn't be that they wouldn't realize that the situation in the country had improved. It was only a matter of time. It takes time to gather troops and supplies too. To invade Cardarasa, one must cross the mountains. In winter, there was too much snow to even approach them. So it was obvious that they would most likely start the invasion in the spring. Before spring, they needed to build up enough strength to defeat their neighbors. And they had already begun the necessary preparations, such as securing food supplies. Then an army would have to be created. Naturally, their army would have magic swords, but that wasn't enough. Agatha asked Takuma to do the training in the winter so that they could prepare for the war in time. And when the war starts, they'll smash everyone to smithereens. And they'll get back the lands and people that were taken from them. Hiro agreed with Takuma. The lands that were taken from them had unique fertility and a population of over 2,000 people. Plus, he wanted to help his suffering people. Takuma could start right now. He thought that with a magic sword in hand, they wouldn't lose. Agatha asked him not to. There were fears that the enemy might invade from the other side. Despite the belligerence and unfriendliness of their neighbors, they still had some sort of relationship built with them. If they attacked from here, the other countries would request reinforcements. But if on the other side, the enemy attacks them, once they are victorious, they can establish ties with their neighbors. There would always be countries that would abandon their neighbors if there was a good reason. Hiro thought, there are plenty of reasons for such betrayal. This way they won't touch them. Agatha turned to Hiro. He assumed they had a chance to win this war, and decided to see if Hiro could create a weapon that could defeat their neighbors. He calculated that if they had until spring, but only if they could get their hands on the iron. He had the blueprints, but the metal needed to be plentiful. They couldn't just collect iron sand or buy iron from other countries. Takuma was worried that he wouldn't make it in time. Hiro told him that when he was at sea, an interesting idea came to him. Agata had hoped for him. What he was going to talk about next was about another use for food. His brother had allowed him to have a harvest festival. A harvest festival, an ode to the bountiful harvest, and a chance for their beloved people to rest. Hiro had offered, but wasn't sure if it was worth using their reserves for a feast that had been canceled 12 years ago. But now they could hold it. They had worked hard to make their country prosper, and one day they would bring his sister back. His father would be surprised when he woke up. It was time for him to go. Today Hiro would take care of the king's business. The city was filled with joy and jubilation. A carriage pulled out of the castle. Hiro could see that everyone was having a good time. Today's speech would make the celebration even more exciting. Finally, the people saw the main face of the celebration. The crowd exploded with enthusiastic shouts. He was dubbed the Prince of Salt, something he himself had not expected. Hiro was loved for bringing back salt. He should have been proud that he had brought smiles to the faces of his people. The love of the people is the best medicine for a country. Besides the Prince of Salt, he was also nicknamed the Prince of Wheat. Both were feats enough for Hiro. Nayuki suggested calling him the Prince of Salt and the Prince of Wheat. Hiro resented this. After all, they were the ones responsible for salt and Agatha for wheat, but all the glory went to him. He believed in his brother's desire to save the country and made the right decision when he told them everything. Takumu encouraged him to proceed further. Hiro, after introducing himself, addressed his people. Before continuing, he smiled nervously. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if he was searching for the strength to say something that was going to change everything. Hiro declared that he was king from this day forward. Everyone close to him believed in him and expected him to conquer new heights. Hiro had the same dream that the people had and aspired for, so he wanted to share his thoughts. Above all, he wanted to ask them if this country had become a better place. He met with unanimous approval. Everyone was happy about the change. Hiro then asked if they thought it could always be like this. The people again responded with cheering. However, he didn't think it would be easy. Their country had a long way to go. They had salt, food for the winter. But that was not all. He wasn't satisfied with that. He wanted more good food, more entertainment, more comforts. He wasn't satisfied with just not starving. They all drank the ale that Nayuki had made. It was a waste they didn't need if they just wanted to live. But this kind of thing enriched the country and the heart. Preserving that wealth, that's what it means to be happy. Hiro wanted to enrich this country, and he wanted them to do the same. He would lead them to happiness. He didn't want to save the country, he wanted a better tomorrow. Hiro encouraged the nation to rise. He couldn't accomplish this alone. His friends followed him. But it still wasn't enough. To realize this dream, he needed the power of the people. The people froze in silence. Suddenly, as if on an invisible signal, there was a deafening shout. The crowd roared, chanting the name of their king. Instead of fearing death and hunger, they looked ahead and believed that tomorrow would be better. The people believed in the future he described to them. Soon they would live like this. They would be rich and happy. Hiro promised that if they followed him, he would make the kingdom of Cardarasa prosper. It became his first promise he made as king. Fireworks erupted, many times bigger than the previous one. The soldiers had done a good job on it. The fireworks were a waste, but a beautiful and inspiring sight. This waste was the happiness he wanted to show everyone. Hiro hoped that everyone who saw it understood his feelings. Someone walked up to him and congratulated him on becoming king. A dazzling smile played on Hibana's lips. She noticed that he was thinking too much for the festival again. Hiro supposed it was because he wanted to make everyone happy. With her, he felt he could go anywhere, so he wanted her to follow him. His next goal was to get iron. For that he would go to the other side of the sea. The girl replied with a soft smile that she was his sword. That night they celebrated, full of hope. Hiro rejoiced so much that he forgot all those years of pain. Just saving wasn't enough, just as it wasn't enough to just live. Now he had only learned how to live, but that was just the starting point. His goal was beyond the horizon. If he settled for the present, he would not be able to move on. He, Hiro Cardarasa, had been reborn and became a prince, and now sought the prosperity of his country.